The Last of Us Remastered.
And this month's PS Plus extra games get twisted. Chris, The Last of Us has already been remastered and then remade. And then the upcoming version that is the director's cut starring Bella Ramsey and...
I'm still surprised there's no skins for that. Still shocked.
Yeah, I told you. You seemed adamant, and I said at worst they will be an option, but I didn't think that they'd cross that line. But just to clarify real quick, the cold open should have been The Last of Us Part 2 remake? Remaster, anything along that? But you know what? I've dropped the ball coming into a cold open, so I'm not going to act like I am, I dropped the ball at the beginning of the last episode referencing the wrong white rap battle. You know what I mean?
Getting mad at me. Like, no, you're fucking wrong.
Look, man, there's too much in my head. They were conflicting. They were fighting, you know?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so it's okay. But... hello and welcome to Triangle Square, the PlayStation Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, as always, is one Mr. Chris Figs. Chris, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing okay, man. How are you?
I am here. As you may know, we did not record our usual day yesterday due to power outages around here, but that seems to have been cleared up, so we should have no problem working it through today. We're not going to do... 3, 2, 1... That would have been fucking fun, though. That would have been incredibly funny, but I would also have been like, damn it.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I got to go fix the clock on my oven.
Dude, oh, my God. That was the worst part about it yesterday.
Oh, I bet.
It starts seeming like it was going to be all right. And then we go fix everything, and then boom! I'm like, there's the blue light back here on my thing. For some reason, the other one doesn't, but this one right here, anytime the power restarts, it just goes into shake all colors. So I have to fix it every time. It kills me. But Chris, we're not going to get into too much today, as we've kind of already talked about behind the scenes, but we do have some stuff. There's some classic games coming back courtesy of an interesting little engine that we've heard from and seen before in the industry. We've got Activision Blizzard finally getting a big win, as well as looking at some of the PS Plus games. And this pesky little, more than a rumor, but also not quite, from The Last of Us Part 2's, I guess the composer, Gustavo. So we'll get to talking about all that, how it may be making its way to PS5. But we're going to start the show off in the time-honored way. So if you're new to the show, we hope you enjoy. Stick around. We have the community's take and everything else we're going to get into. But we're going to start the show off by just checking in on what we've been playing. So, Chris, take this opportunity to fill the audience in on the new goodness or the old goodness that you've maybe been playing this week.
I have actually played a lot of games this week, even more than I've listed on our document.
Your list looks impressive.
Oh, I've got more than that, sadly, but the main ones I've played is a lot of Rogue Legacy 2. And when I say a lot of Rogue Legacy 2, it was one night where I time traveled. You know what I mean? You have those time travel games, right? Where you start it and then you look up and it's 6 o'clock in the morning and you started playing at 8 o'clock. That was Rogue Legacy. Because I had to work at 9 a.m. So I'm like, I put Rogue Legacy on because it was no consequence. And I'm like, I can play 1 or 2 rounds, get in bed in an hour. It'll be fine. I went to bed at 4 and I had to be up in 4 hours. So Rogue Legacy 2 is very fun. I liked it a lot. The other game I've played, which is really good, we talked about it a little bit at the end of the last show. Yes, the last show. And that is Severed Soul, which is fucking phenomenal.
Severed Steel?
Is it Severed Steel? Did I say the wrong name? Severed something. It's purple. It's got a lot of purple.
Yes, Severed Steel.
Severed Steel.
Yep.
So yes, I have been playing a lot of Severed Steel, and that game is really fun. And it's funny because you're the second person I recommended that game to, or you're the first person, but 2 people have told me, "Oh, this would be perfect for VR." Right?
Oh yeah.
And I'm playing this game. I would never want to play this in VR. You would throw up immediately.
I'm going to tell you soon because I haven't bought Synapse yet, but I'm intending on doing that. Actually, I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to go and redeem my Sony reward points so it can
live
send me a code
purchases.
While we're recording.
Let's go. So the main thing with this game is you can slow down time. You can slide, and you can dive, and you can double jump, and you can shoot. There's like 4 buttons, and that's what they do. Now, here's the thing. Why I don't think it's possible in VR, right? Because the way I've killed a lot of enemies is I'll jump, double jump, and then dive in slow motion, and then just do front flips until I get an angle on these guys and shoot them. I don't think that you can do that in VR and not immediately throw up.
I don't know. I think your experience with VR is limited at PSVR and then that little stint of you doing Resident Evil 4 when you came down, right?
Correct.
Okay. I would tell you that most of what you experience with PSVR 1, you would probably throw up in a heartbeat. You'd probably be immediate. There's a lot of questions over how you would go about making that game work in a way that feels right with comfort settings. Because I did play some VR this week. I'll get that out of the way first. And while we're talking about the thing I played with Stingray X, John, Walkabout Mini Golf, which was a fucking blast. And I already like mini golf, but I thought, this is probably not going to be very good. I would have never thought myself to buy a mini golf game, but we had talked about playing, and he was like, well, what other multiplayer games do you have? And I was like, I have other ones, but it's like Gran Turismo, and I was like, I don't have a whole lot. So I was like, what are your recommendations? And he recommended it, and I have enough Sony reward points to last me a lifetime at this particular point. So I just went and got the reward points and redeemed them and bought the game, and we played for about 2.5 hours, and it was a great time. And I really didn't want to get off, but I had forgotten to charge my controllers beforehand, so one of them was dying. But we were doing great. It was a good time. There's this secondary mini game that's kind of within it, where any course you're on, each hole's got a hidden ball when you're on the normal course. And then if you can find all the balls, you unlock the hard version of the course. And then there was another hunt in the hard version of the course. Where if you can find all of those things, you get a golf club, and they're all just, you choose what you want so you can see what you see and what the other players see. But it's a great time. You can fly around. There's like a tee off place in this practice hub that it kind of starts you off in, where you can shoot. There's a trophy for hitting all the targets, and some of them are really far away. So it becomes like actual golf for a second. But it was a great time. And it had the similar thing where if you are in-game chat instead of a party chat, then your mouth moves when you talk and all that. It's just a good time. Waving your golf club in front of the other's face while they're trying to putt off. I had a good time, and it continues to remind me of that. VR is very good, and I'm excited to go into Synapse and do that. But I'm curious. Synapse, I think, will give me a better feel as to what I think is possible comfortably in VR.
Yeah.
In terms of first-person shooting, when you take it more away from just boots on the ground, because that's the question, right? It's like once you start jumping in the air and diving and doing anything crazy, what can happen?
Yeah, it was just one of those things where I was playing Severed Steel, and I'm like, I'm feeling a little queasy. You know what I mean? But it was cool because
do you find that you have that in certain games? And I didn't mean to cut you off, but my buddy, he couldn't play Mirror's Edge, the first one, on PS3, and even on PC with a higher frame rate, he could not play the Talos Principle because he said that they gave him motion sickness. Do you have that often, or is it just like here and there?
And it's when I say it makes me queasy, all I mean is like I have the sense that like if I was doing this, I would feel sick. Not like I'm like feeling, you know what I mean? Because I was thinking about it through the context of VR, because my friend was like, oh, I'm not going to buy it, but if it was VR, I probably would. And I'm like, but I don't think you could play it in VR. So like thinking about the actions that I'm doing in the game, I was like, I don't know. But it's really fun. I highly recommend it. I think it's a really good time. Soundtrack is killer too, so.
Yeah, it'll be curious to see some of these games that are coming out now. Will they ever in the future, if VR continues to improve at a certain rate, will some of these games eventually become VR games? Because the other question is maybe it's just not there right now, but I don't know, because there's some pretty wild stuff in Bone Labs, which is Oculus. So I mean, you can get it elsewhere, I think, but I played it on Oculus, and that game made me sick. And it had you doing a lot of full body movement and jumping around, and a lot of the times the disconnect you get in those games is when you jump, but your body doesn't move.
Yeah.
And so your brain's like, I just saw things fly by without feeling the body motion that should be tied to that.
Well, what makes you feel better, there is a VR mod for Severed Steel.
We'll look at that. Leave it up to the community. If you look out, the community already has PSVR 2 on computer working enough to launch games into it and run kind of rudimentarily. Someone has played, not all, but has gotten Half-Life Alyx running on PSVR 2 on PC. Ooh. With at least bare minimum, functionality. Yeah. So, and we're only a few months out. Think about, we're not far from being able to have this set up to where, regardless of whether Sony wants to support it officially or not, you can just plug it into your computer and have a whole other avenue.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised Sony hasn't done it, but
you think because it's like an inevitability. Like if the people are going to figure out how to do it anyway, why wouldn't you just be like, yeah, fuck it. You can buy a headset. Because I was talking to John about that, and I was like, realistically, having someone buy the headset, regardless of the reason, only increases their chances of buying PSVR 2 games. Mm-hmm. You're definitely not going to buy it if you just don't buy the PSVR 2. If you don't have the headset, you're not going to buy the games.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Worst case scenario, if someone buys a PSVR 2, even just for a computer, what are the chances they go, well, that VR exclusive game looks kind of cool on PS5, and I already have the headset. I mean, I could just buy a PS5. And then you might even run into getting them into the full PlayStation ecosystem. So it's like, in the end, what does it really hurt? But we'll see, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, some of the other stuff about it is it's really cool. Like when you run out of bullets in the gun, you can throw the gun. So there's a lot of cool combos of like hitting a guy in the leg, throwing your gun at him, taking the gun. That's one of the cool things. You can slow down time and go to an enemy, take the gun out of his hand, and then kill him, and then keep going. So there's a lot of cool shit in that game. There's a lot of cool shit in that game. It's not. There is. It was $9.99. I do not know if it still is $9.99 because it was on sale. That's why I bought it. So
stuff like that's always really cool. Like the whole Pavlov being able to run up to somebody and just pull the magazine out of their gun.
Yeah.
That is an incredible idea. It's like, mm-hmm. Oh yeah, just an extra thing you can do.
Can't you like pull the pin on their grenade and run away? Like stupid stuff like that.
And unless they go to do their hand, yeah, you can. Now whether or not it'll end up doing anything it depends on what the other person's reaction is. But yeah,
just drop it. Go shit. But yeah, other than that, I think we can talk about the game I platinumed this week a little in the PS Plus thing. But I have played a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 in early access recently. I'm so excited for that game.
Couldn't wait for full release, huh?
First off, I already had this. I bought this like a year and a half ago. So
is early access still just the first act, or have they continued to?
No, it's just the first act. And that's the one weird thing is I was thinking about getting the deluxe edition of this, but the deluxe edition comes with early access for just the first act. And I'm like, why?
I mean, yeah.
On console. So it's not like it's like they're putting this version out there for the beginning. It's like you're getting the full game, but it cuts you off after 3 days, which I think is a little odd. But dude, I don't know your interest level or your excitement level, but genuinely, if we can get this consistent, we're gonna have so much goddamn fun.
Dude,
I'm so excited.
I'm excited. The game is clearly the nexus of the excitement because it's the thing pulling it all together.
Right.
But I'm excited for the social aspects around the game.
Yeah.
If nothing else. And I say that because I've not spent a lot of time playing any of Valerian's games. So I don't think there's that built-in love like for, oh yeah, I'm excited. But I have experience playing the original Baldur's Gate and and Baldur's Gate 2 from Obsidian. And our BioWare?
BlackRock, I think, right?
Now I got myself, I can't remember which one of them did it. I think it's BioWare. I feel fairly good about that. Let's find out. Baldur's Gate 2, if nothing else.
In Exile, maybe? The guys behind them.
BioWare.
That was
That's what I
Bioware.
thought.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
So either way, yeah, I'm curious to see how that goes down, and I'm curious to talk about the other game that you platinum. But yeah, we'll save that. My other game is I finally beat Final Fantasy 16. I can say without a doubt now that I think this game is I anything from an 8 upwards. I think is a perfectly fair score. But I would imagine that most people who are playing it and are going through it's a 10 out of 10 for it's like a personal 10 out of 10, you know what I mean? But even when I try and look at it more, it's like even if it's not perfect, there's not obvious ways within staying with what the project wanted to be to make the game better. It's got incredible story writing, incredible character arcs, really fun gameplay. Whether or not it's exactly what you were wanting from a Final Fantasy is a different story. But if you look at it in a vacuum, it's got great gameplay. I still like the side quest and what they do for the world. I'm not saying there hasn't been better side quests, but I think this game does a good job with it. I really like what I talked about last week, the idea of it kind of being a hub based, where you have 4 different hubs that you can explore. Some parts are wide, some parts are more narrow, to where it's almost like a pseudo open world, because you can always go back to anywhere, where unlike a Devil May Cry or something like that, where you're just going through a stage and then you're done with it and you move on. The ability to go back and to semi-explore is really fun. And I think it gives you a sense of that open feeling that open world games have, without falling into the same problem that Final Fantasy 15 fell into, where it had a true open world, but it had no fucking clue what to do with it. Mm-hmm. It was open world for the sake of doing what the industry was doing, but it didn't understand how to be open world. It wasn't even Ubisoft open world. Like, there was nothing to do in it. You would just Mafia be running.
2 open world.
Yeah, it's like you're just running for large swaths of time with nothing happening, and you're just kind of like, okay. Like Grand Theft Auto 3 figured this out on PlayStation 2. 16 years ago, 17 years ago. I can't remember exactly when. Let's just land on 15.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's yeah. So it was interesting, but I'm so glad it didn't fall into those same things. And I think its importance to the story and limiting the scope of certain things down led to a great game. And it's going to be really hard for anything that comes this year to top this. It's just, this feels like a once in a generation game.
Wow. Already.
Yeah. It's harder. It hit harder on my excitement levels than I ever thought it could have. And a lot of that was because 15 was just all right.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that built-in 14 hype that everyone else has, where like, I know that Yoshi P is a good director and I know he's beloved in his storytelling chops, but I still didn't anticipate it coming out in this way. But go ahead. What were you going to ask?
I don't know how to phrase the question properly, but I'm coming at 16 with little to no excitement. Like I said on the other show a couple weeks ago when we talked about how I hadn't really played it, where I'm like, yeah, I like that the team the console I play for has it on it. But outside of that, I'm not coming at it with too much. Do you think this game is a 10 out of 10 because you're a Final Fantasy fan and you were excited for it? Or is it just like someone like me? Am I going to go into it and be like, oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever played? Not that you've said that, but sure. What I'm going for?
I think, to answer the question honestly, because this game does so much to shirk off what most people would expect from a Final Fantasy, which I've long said I don't think expecting anything from Final Fantasy outside of world and lore aspects being somewhat present in some way, like Moogles and Chocobo. Yeah, all that stuff. Like, that's the stuff that you can expect that kind of ties them all together. But otherwise, gameplay-wise, story-wise, time period-wise, how sci-fi or not they plan on getting kind of differs wildly from game to game. Mm-hmm. So I would say that this is a really good jumping in point for a lot of people, because it changes just enough stuff that even if you are a Final Fantasy fan, it might be pushing enough in a different direction that it's challenging what you think about Final Fantasy. Okay. And if anything, that actually might make you actively dislike it more than you should. So you're kind of in the experience of almost playing it in a vacuum, right? Like, you're almost playing it with little context, little to no context about Final Fantasy. Like, you have played some Final Fantasy, but not a lot.
Correct.
And to that end, I think that excitement's there whether or not you are a Final Fantasy fan. As for its exclusivity, I think this game is just as good regardless of whether it's exclusive or not.
I don't think, I didn't mean to imply that exclusivity makes it better. It's literally the one reason of excitement I have for it. Where I'm like, I play PlayStation and PlayStation has this exclusively. So there's that little bit of like, I hope it does well. And again, that's just toxic Twitter shit, realistically. But
I think in and out of context of the game and what the games industry is doing, what Final Fantasy as a series has been doing for a long time, it's just great. I think that it's been a while since I think a game has had. And I know some people are going to look strong. I think Ragnarok was a great game, but I do think Ragnarok was a lot more sloppily written and paced than God of War 2018. And that doesn't mean that it's a bad game. I still think it's great. But I think that this gave me the same feelings that 2018 God of War did, where it's paced so well. And it doesn't mean that it never falters, but it falters so little that it's almost hard. Because, like, I think media across the board right now is hitting this point where they tend to really lose themselves in the third act. And I don't think that this game hits that problem at all. I was really surprised. I kept expecting and waiting for the game, and not as a gotcha moment or even anything, just as the game will eventually fail or falter a considerable amount and it'll be okay. But, it's to be expected because it's been too good for too long. And that just didn't happen. And it really surprised me. I think that whether or not you come into it wanting to play all the side content or not, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the way you feel about the game as a whole. I think it does a good job of separating the main quest from the side quest, but the side quests just serve to make you more informed and feel more about the world and the lore and build it out as something that's even more believable than I think it is when presented through the lens of just the main story. So one of these days, I hope you get back to it. But as we've been talking about the past few weeks, don't play it until you're feeling it. When you have the itch, give it a try.
It's just one of those things where, like, for context for me, the farthest I've ever made it into a Final Fantasy game is the house boss in Final Fantasy VII Remake. That's the farthest I've ever made it.
Not far. I mean, that's kind of considerably into the game. Oh,
okay. Well, then there you go. There, and I got to the boat in the original Final Fantasy, and I stopped playing because that was very confusing. So it's one of those things where I would almost rather not play it anymore than drop it and have to be like, I didn't like it very much, because that sucks.
Yeah. No, I feel you. Yeah,
the air of mystery.
Don't keep playing it. But I think one day if you'll get to a point where you play a few hours, I'd be a little surprised if the game didn't get its grips into you.
I mean, I was into it, for the record. I watched that beginning and I was like, this is dope.
Yeah.
But I also just haven't turned it on again. And it's also one of those things where I don't know if you've had this, but I'm being paralyzed to start it because I don't necessarily have... I don't want to start it and then not sit there for 8 hours. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm not even going to turn it on.
It's almost a game where I'm like, go into it on a day where you could see yourself playing it. You're kind of like, oh, you know what, maybe. But I have like three or more hours to actually sit and kind of soak it in at once. That's when you should do it. I don't think that you should hop in again when you have 30 minutes or an hour.
That's what I'm thinking.
I think you should hop in when you have time to let the game sink in, and where you'll get to be like, okay, shit, there's a lot going on, but I'm invested in the characters and the world and what's happening. I want to see it continue. Because like we said, you made your little joke about the part you did see of like, this game has an opening, and it's like, yeah, that game has an opening, in a very specific and very pointed way that the end of the game really takes into account too. I really like how this game came back around. There's an interesting post-credits scene that is meant to stir a little bit of stuff, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't gotten there yet. And of course, I don't want to spoil it for a million different things. But Chris, you should not look it up.
I'm not. I just sent you a question, and then I don't even need you to answer it. Just want to see you react. Okay, that's good at least.
Yeah, no, it's so funny how little you even have. Like, you're not even in the ballpark. Well, I'll take that back. In a way, I don't want to say too much, but you're like 2 blocks from, the stadium.
Gotcha.
You'll understand when you start playing, because the first time that something happens is like after the first 4 to 6 hours, depending on how you're playing. But yeah, one of these days we'll be able to talk in depth about it. But what a game, man! What a freaking game! So here's the hoping. Awesome. It's a much shorter game, but here's the hoping that Immortals of Avium game can just hit and be great all the way through. It's probably 16 hours, and this is incredible through its 50 or so hours. That I don't even know how long I played it. I need to look at my PlayStation and see what it says, because I feel like I've played this for 100 hours. I've been doing a lot of side content and hunts, so maybe I have. But
are you gonna get the platinum? Number 175.
I don't know about right now, but I do intend to get the platinum eventually. So we'll see.
I like that. I like that a lot.
There's a lot of stuff coming out, so it's really hard to say.
We'll see. It's busy.
All right, let's see here. We've got the community's take we're going to go ahead and go into. If you're new to the show and don't know what the community's take is, every episode we get a question either from the episode or from one of the audience members, or something that just comes to mind, where we kind of reach out and give you guys something about gaming that we talk about and get your guys' thoughts, whether or not you want to push back on something we said without a question that maybe relates to the previous show, or just something going on. Open our eyes to a new perspective, or anything like that, if you just want to get your voice heard. So the community's take this week came from Pork Chops, one of our listeners. He says, when it comes to playing PvP or even PvE multiplayer games, do you prefer to play ones that have a meta character loadout / build that is static, or do you enjoy the meta game that the developers play with gamers, where they continually buff and nerf the game, even if the current meta isn't game breaking, but it said, quote, that's not how we intend you to play, end quote, ? So I'm not super surprised about this. We didn't get a whole lot of answers. And when I thought about the fact that we asked this, and I wanted to stick with it, I know that a lot of our community is not super heavy into multiplayer games. And I think this is a very multiplayer games focused question. This is something that people who primarily play multiplayer are going to have more of a stronger opinion, I feel like. Whereas people who play mostly single player are going to feel like, doesn't really matter, or whatever. You don't feel like they interact with it enough. So we did get 2 answers. Both of them from patrons. First one was from Jehudi MD, longtime listener, longtime patron. Thank you, Jehudi. He says, I think the meta has a time and place. Some games work with such structure while others may not. I played Apex Legends in the past for a period of time where that meta game worked, and I liked it. Forcing a whole group of people to change their weapons / loadout of choice keeps the game fresh. However, the downside to this is that the new weapon is usually the one with the most buffs, which is understandable in the short term. And yeah, I can see that being a problem, where typically the way they shake it up is by introducing a weapon that then everyone starts using.
Mm-hmm. That is the Apex model. One thing me and my friend always joke about, right? No matter how fucked Apex is, the store will always work, and the new gun will always be broken for at least 3 weeks. Those are the only things we ever say.
It's a balancing act that's pretty hard, right? Because in that type of game, introducing a new gun, if you don't introduce it in a way where it's obviously good, you have a high chance that no one's going to play with it. And if no one's going to play with it, at what point was adding the gun even good?
Yes, exactly.
But the downside to that is when you add a weapon that's so obviously good, and then the people who are playing it know that one of the best ways to do well at the game is to use that gun or a handful of guns that are good, the question just comes back in the reverse of, well, then why are all the rest of the guns even in the game if pretty much no one's using them? Now, of course, the answer is that in a game like Apex or any kind of battle royale, it's because you build up. So you get a gun, and it's a roll of the dice as to whether you get something that you like or not. And it forces you to get proficient with every gun enough to that the fact that you hopefully survive until you can get another gun that you want. And so it kind of works, but it depends on the games. I think about that even in single player games. You get to a point where it's like, if you're not going to make sure that certain things are balanced, why did you worry about putting them in the game? But thankfully, multiplayer can always switch that up, and suddenly you can, if you want to, buff the hell out of a gun that no one was using, or a sword that no one was using, or whatever it be. We got one more answer from Rude Days 93, another patron. He says, if I have to pick a side, it's the metagame. Just because there can be more customization and different styles of play. I would love it if every game was balanced so we didn't have to deal with worrying about buffs and nerfs, but you're almost asking the impossible because there's not enough people testing the games to notice the buffs as they're being developed or even being noticed and fixed from the many betas games have. It's interesting because I think we kind of just said that in one side, the meta could lead to not enough different styles of play, but I think it depends on the type of game. Clearly, that's not a catch-all answer. Because I think games like Destiny, which are not focused around something like a slowly build your gear up and survive, is a lot different. While still having the same, we're going to swap the meta, we're going to change what supers are doing what, and what weapons are good with what supers and what items. Sunset certain guns so that they're not around anymore, so you force people into new ones. So that's a very different way of doing something where there's still a meta game and there's still rotations, but it's not really in the same gameplay style. So in that sense, yeah, I would say that Destiny does get to a point where you can see more customization and different styles of play in that sense. And then Apex is more, you can see a bunch of customization and styles of play based solely off of what the person gets and how creative they want to be with what their loadout is.
Right.
I assume, is Apex kind of like, I haven't played a lot of any of these style of games, so, but I talked to a friend at work about it. So is Apex kind of like Modern Warfare or Warzone rather, where you can set a loadout and something will drop and you can go to it and get your exact loadout? Okay. I've always thought that was kind of an interesting thing because I get it, but it also seems like it kind of lies in opposition with the rest of the design of the game, that if you just wait long enough and survive long enough, you're going to be able to get exactly what you want.
Yeah. No, there's no getting exactly what you want in Apex, really, unless you're extremely lucky. But even then, you're almost always going to be missing something from the optimal kit. Either whether
do you
it's
think that makes Apex more fun, or do you think it's just they're scratching different itches?
Well, I think the thing I have with Modern Warfare is like when I have my loadout, I spend the beginning of the game not necessarily looking for fights and not looking for weapons or looting like you should be, but I'm like, okay, when we got to get a loadout drop, right? We got to go get a loadout drop because I want my guns. Changes. Right, exactly. Whereas in Apex, you drop in, you pick up a gun, and you go fight. And and it depends on the way you play it. Like me and my Apex partner, we have a difference of opinion where for me, I think the best way to loot is to go kill enemies. But he wants to just loot until he's full, and that's when he stops.
Look at that, Chris. Clutch. Sorry, dogs. It's okay. I can kind of see that. I also wonder if part of why Call of Duty did it is it's a bit of a hangover for the fact that Call of Duty was already a big multiplayer game with the more traditional loadout style. And so when they brought Warzone in, their tweak to the model, as all series do, Apex was like, well, we're going to let you run on walls and stuff and do it. And then Fortnite's like, we're going to let you build. So I think their thing was, okay, we're going to mix more traditional multiplayer gameplay ideology in with this so that you get a bit of both worlds. You get to where you do have to survive with what you get, but then you can also always know that because if I remember those games, you got to have enough money to buy your loadout. So you have to at least get to the loadout point and have earned enough money to buy the loadout that you want.
They do get dropped in.
Okay, so, I know they get dropped in. I can't remember if you had to actually buy them at that point, or if it's just survive long enough.
You definitely used to have to buy them, but now they just drop in, and I think you might be able to buy them. I don't remember. I don't play Warzone at all.
Yeah, me either. Clearly, so that's interesting. I mean, I see both sides, but I think if I have to answer, I think like we talked about last week, it is just the idea of something that I can get familiar with and never changes no matter how long I go away. And eventually one day it'll die and that sucks. But I'd rather personally have that. That's more fun for me. Like, the heyday of playing Killzone 3 online was a great time. Resistance 2 online, great time. Killzone 2 online, great time. And yeah, while they all eventually die because they don't rotate enough and the player base masters or reaches their level of what they wanted to do with that style and moves on, I think I view them a little more fondly because it feels like more time and place. Though I guess maybe a fraction of that with games like Apex is you can remember that time period of Apex even if you continue to play it, but that's just not me. I have other games to play. I've been playing Final Fantasy 16 for 5 weeks or whatever it is, when it used to I feel like I'd burn through a game. One upside from that is I do feel like I have a much better memory of Final Fantasy 16 because I played it over such a long breadth of time, whereas sometimes when you just hammer a game out, I feel like it kind of goes into your brain and then leaves your brain because you jump onto the next thing and you hammer that out and you start getting like very butchered versions of how you felt about the game because they're mixing with other games and hard to say. All right, Chris. Well, I think if you are ready, then we can get ready to go into the news. What do you say?
Let's news it.
News it up. Before we news it up, like we said, if you are listening to the podcast and you're listening on a podcast service that allows you to rate and or review the show, please consider doing so. Doesn't take too much time out of your day, and it lets people know whether or not you think the show is worth your time, as well as for the ones that review, gives us things that people like the ability to do timestamps or what have you. You may have noticed last week we didn't have a video version. We had a lot of technical problems last week that ended up messing the show up, and the fact that we got an episode out that was coherent was actually kind of a miracle in and of itself. So apologize for that, but we're working around that. Remember that we have timestamps. Listen to the things that you find interesting. If there's sections that you don't think are going to interest you, we don't mind if you skip them. It's just the nature of having so many varied people and different opinions. But with that said, let's move into the news. We don't have a whole lot. So the first thing, as we kind of talked about earlier, Gustavo Santa, I'm going to tell you right now, I have no clue how to say this. Is Santa Alala? We'll say that, has apparently spilled the beans on an enhanced version of The Last of Us Part 2. Gustavo is the composer for the first game and the first season of the TV show. In an interview with Blender, he talks about how his role in the new version would be expanded and players could get him to play specific themes from the game. He stopped himself from going much further and revealed nothing else. The Last of Us Part 2 is currently one of the few PS4 swan song games to not yet have a PS5 director's cut. So a re-release does make some sense in terms of historical of what PlayStation's done, but there's also to note that the PS5 can play The Last of Us Part 2 via enhanced backwards compatibility at 60 frames per second, and it already has the DualSense features in the game. So I don't know if there's as much of a need for it. That's kind of where you get into this weird thing. It feels like if you were going to do this, doing it around the same time as all your other ones would have been the thing. But I wonder if part of this was The Last of Us Part 2 got to be part of a pretty big online hate campaign for it. Whether or not the game is the greatest game or not, or has issues, is not the problem. It got targeted for a bunch of stuff that really wasn't even about the game, in all honesty.
And
so
wrong.
I wonder if part of and completely wrong. That's the more funny part. But there's another thing that's not wrong, but people have a strong opinion on it that, we've talked about in our spoiler cast episode we did for it. But with all that said, I feel like maybe what they did is they just wanted more time between that controversy and a re-release. And now that The Last of Us Part 1 season came out, The Last of Us Part 1 game remake came out, maybe now is the time to do it because you have that preamble game. Now you have this game. They're more technologically similar and you're even more removed from the bad controversy. Now, of course, that controversy is going to see some form of revival, but you also have more new eyes on the series than ever. I can kind of see this, but I don't know,
I think it makes a ton of sense, but it also doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, it didn't make sense to do it with Ghost of Tsushima or Days Gone or Death Stranding, really. Actually, Death Stranding out of all of them, I would say, made the most sense because there was a lot more shit in that game.
Yeah, I think that's and actually, you said Days Gone. It did get a PS5 update. but it didn't get a director's cut.
Oh, right. Sorry.
No, but you're right. So Death Stranding and Ghosts were the two games that got this treatment. And Ghosts didn't really change a whole lot from what I understood. I mean, whenever I replayed it, I didn't notice anything that different. Whereas almost everyone I've talked to who's played Death Stranding is like, oh yeah, they changed a bunch.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, clearly not to the story, but there's a lot of gameplay elements outside of the story for Death Stranding.
Yeah,
Chris can tell you he became a delivery man for 42 hours, completely separate from the story.
100%.
Every time I check in on Chris, like, hey man, you make any progress in the story? Nah, it's been delivering packages, my guy.
Yeah. No, great, fantastic game. But yeah, in terms of this game, I don't know. It almost makes me wonder if it just makes more sense to, at this point, wait until season 2. But then, with the SAG-AFTRA strike and all of this kind of stuff, it's like,
how long is that?
How long? Be? And then at what point do you say, okay, fuck this. The PS6 launches with The Last of Us Part 1 Remaster. The Last of Us Part 1 Remake Remaster. It comes with The Last of Us Part 2 Remaster. And it comes with the first 2 seasons of The Last of Us. Right? Like, at a certain point, we push the can so far down the road that you might as well just do all of that.
I wonder, hidden benefit of the SAG-AFTRA strike and everything is that they needed more time for Bella Ramsey to look a little older for season 2. If this kicks the can down the road a little bit longer, maybe they can kind of make it work.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Because isn't Bella Ramsey already like 19?
Maybe.
Is she really going to change that much? She's 19.
I don't know.
Is she really going to change that much in another 2 years?
Maybe.
Well, I guess they probably filmed that when she was like 17, but you still have to kind of ask, like, how much can really change?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. I wouldn't be surprised if this was real, but I'm kind of at the point where it's like, it's a little crazy. I was willing to defend The Last of Us Part 1 remake, but I don't really feel like they need to do this personally.
Market wise, I can understand it, because if you have a PS5 and you just got one, maybe for The Last of Us Part 1, I don't think most people are going to look and be like, well, I'm going to buy the PS4 game. I think it's going to be easier to hit a group of people who are like, ooh, PS5. I haven't played that. Cool, it's new. It's fresh.
Yeah,
So I think it's one of those things where, much like the last one, I want to use your same argument. So much as I also felt this way about the previous one myself, it's not for me or you. It's for people who have probably not played the game, or people who loved it so much that they would spend another $50, $60, $70, I guess, because the Last of Us Part 1 was $70. So,
listen, all I can tell you is that I would pay the $10 upgrade fee to get the platinum again. So who knows? Like, it's coming for me. I know he's coming at my wallet, that Jim Ryan.
It's the source of this that makes it feel like it's probably going to happen. If it was anyone other than Gustavo, and the way he was talking is like they're going to have it, because he has a cameo in that game where you can just see him playing banjo, and apparently now you can walk up to him, hit a button, and you can tell him to go through different songs from the game, which is cool. But that also sounds like that's clearly not what was in the game. So if he's talking about how they've been setting that up for him, something's happening. Either they're updating the game that's already there, or they're re-releasing it.
They're definitely re-releasing it. And that'll be the big marketing thing. It'll be like 4K upgraded textures, 60 FPS, Gustavo sings.
I have the actual answer, though. Do you remember how Beyond Two Souls was a PS3 swan song game? And the original release of that game bounced the time back and forth between, like, she's a kid, now she's much older, now she's a teenager, now she's a little bit older, now she's a kid. I don't know if you played that game, but that's what happened.
No, I didn't.
In the remaster they came out with on PS4, they made it to where you could play the game chronologically. And I think that's how it was actually set up. And you could choose to play it the other way if you wanted to, but it was set up to play chronologically. That's what they're going to do here. They're going to use this as a way to rework the pacing of the game. That was one of the most common complaints, even from people who enjoyed the game a lot. that might be what they do.
That would make it worth it. That would straight up make it worth it. Even if they take out the hour-long tutorial 30 hours into the game, that one change would be like, yeah, okay, this will be all right. Let's go get burritos. 30 hours. I don't need to throw a ball. Ugh.
But that's how you get to feel for the dog, man.
It's a dog. I didn't need to feel for it.
Are you telling me I can't even say too much because I don't want to spoil Red Dead 2? So you know what?
No, you're missing my point.
For another day.
saying the fact that it's a dog, I already connect to it because it's a pupper. It's a little doggy guy.
But these people, fuck them.
Little good boy. We're not talking about Baldur's Gate 3 right now.
You're right. We're not talking about Gex either, but we will be soon. Moving on to the next thing, we have the July PS Plus Extra / Premium games for the month. So you get a lot of additions to this. Actually, it's a pretty cool one. So on the Extra and Premium, of course, side, but Extra is included with all these. It Takes Two, PS4, PS5, Sniper Elite 5, SnowRunner, World War Z, The Ascent, Undertale, SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, Melty Blood Type Lumina, Dismantle Circus Electric, Dynasty Warriors 9, Samurai Warriors 5, My Little Pony, A Maritime Bay Adventure, Fast and Furious Spy Racers Rise of Shifter. Whew. Boy, tell you what a name for a game right there. So,
you gonna play it?
I kind of want to for
Me
free.
Too. Yeah.
I would never have bought it. But I kind of want to play it for free
because it was like on sale for like $9. I'm like, this game looks so bad.
Is this what is it? Was it a re-release of the one that originally?
No, I think it's a
out?
sequel.
That game got a sequel. You're right. That game was called Fast and Furious Crossroads, wasn't it?
It was.
So hold on. What is this game then? I thought that's what it was.
No.
Oh man, no. What is happening? This came out in 2021. Was that not the same year? Did he get 2 games in 1 year? 2020. Okay, it was a year apart. Well, now I got to know. Is it a racing game? Okay, I got to play it. It also got a 6 out of 10 on Steam. That's where it's at. Oh man, I wanted it to be Crossroads because that game looked weirdly jank, and I was willing to try that out. Maybe that's already on something. You know what I mean? Or didn't that game get delisted already?
I'm not sure. No, I don't think it got delisted.
Yeah. Announced the game would be delisted from all platforms by end of April 2022. Yeah, that's so the original game already got man. That is rough. But I will try It Takes Two finally. I've been meaning to do it anyway. I think that'll be a good time. I've always heard good things about the Sniper Elite games, but I've only played the very first one and not a whole lot of it. So yeah, there's a lot here. I never got around to The Ascent, which I know you already have, so I really don't need it to do it, but it's cool to see this. World War Z, I've heard good things about.
Yeah, the game's pretty good.
Yeah, so there's a lot here, but then we get to the PS Plus premium games, the classics they've added. So we have Gravity Crash Portable, available for both PS4, PS5, Twisted Metal 1 and Twisted Metal 2. Let's go, baby! Right ahead of the Twisted Metal show. I haven't watched it yet. I've been meaning to, but I heard that there's a new trailer for Twisted Metal that is so much better.
Oh yeah, I actually want to see it now,
and I'm curious because I didn't hate the last one. I mean, it also wasn't great, but I didn't hate it. I thought it was a weird choice.
I thought it was
to show that. I think that's like you show that in context. I don't know why you would show that out of context, but they're trying to set up the dark humor aspect, I guess, of it, or it being dark but humorous. But yeah, I want to watch the new trailer. But yeah, this is cool. I love Twisted Metal 1, love Twisted Metal 2. I know other people have a very different opinion on this, but I wish we would have seen 3 and 4 and Small Brawl and all those added as well. But it's okay. We can give it time. We'll get there. So Chris,
Brett,
you played and platinumed Twisted Metal 2.
Correctamundo.
Did you have a good time?
I had pockets of a good time.
Pocketfuls.
Yeah. Pocketfuls of tots. I don't know how to explain it. I don't have nostalgia for Twisted Metal.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you not play it much as a kid?
I didn't play it at all.
Yeah.
So I played this and I'm like, I see why this is fun, but this controls like shit and I'm not really enjoying this 90% of the time I'm playing it.
Yeah, Twisted Metal 1 and 2 in particular control. Twisted Metal 1 is so much worse in control. I love the game, and I have great memories of playing it, and Twisted Metal 2 as well. I think the first one that actually controlled well, but had other issues that as an adult I can more clearly see, but as a kid I loved it. Twisted Metal 4. It also had Rob Zombie. No, it was a PS1 game, Twisted Metal 4. But Twisted Metal Black is the first. It's the one that I think you should play. If you have access to it, Twisted Metal Black still plays well, holds up really well. It's been re-released a couple of times. I'm pretty sure it is. It was on PS3 for sure, and I'm pretty sure it released on PS4. Great game. Chock full of secrets and stuff. So really good time. We have a question here, which I think is probably going to land a little differently for you because of the fact that you don't really have the history. Right. But Stingray X, one of our longtime listeners and former patrons, he said, for the releases of Twisted Metal 1 and 2 for Extra, what's your favorite character of the series? Mine is Axel. As a kid, there was nothing cooler than a guy with wheels for hands shooting a machine gun, which is absolutely true. So I don't know that Chris will have an answer, though I guess he did just play a little bit of Twisted Metal 2. So Chris, do you want to give it a shot? Do you have a character that kind of stood out to you in what you did play?
Thumper.
Oh, Thumper's cool.
Yeah. This is the one with the fire, right?
Yes.
Yeah, then that was Thumper. The little pink Impala or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Thumper was
iconic
my favorite
car.
player. 100%. Yeah, Thumper was my favorite.
Iconic car. I clearly Sweet Tooth is such a big hit for everybody, and he's a very iconic character, and I do love him. But I have a couple other characters that come to mind. The one that actually comes to mind the most, this is also another reason that Black is a fantastic game. Black has like a story for every character, and they're breaking out of an asylum. And it's pretty cool how it works out, but there's this character that you can unlock as a secret character, and he has a story mode once you unlock him, and his name is Minion. And he speaks in text, or he speaks in digits. So when you see it, you can start to get stuff that kind of allows you to decode what he's saying. And if you take down the notes, you find out that like he's talking in code because he fears that someone can understand and get and hear the messages he's sending out if he doesn't speak in a code. And I don't want to say too much, but his story ends up playing out in a pretty cool fashion. And you kind of have this back and forth of slowly but surely kind of getting his code down and being able to get these different things. It was cool as shit as a kid. It was one of those cool meta games where you're like, this is awesome. I can't believe this exists. But it's also just, I think it fits the tone and themes of Twisted Metal really well.
Is he the same Minion from Twisted Metal 2?
No.
Got it. Well, I mean, it makes
sense.
Which
is also an interesting thing in Twisted Metal. There are characters across games that switch up. It's really hard to describe, but yeah, it's like one character in one game may be different. Because like in certain games, you'll see that, and it depends on how you go, but like, the taxi, that is, what's his name? Miles Kane or whatever. I can't even think of what right now, but it's Twisted Metal. It's Twisted Metal. It's Sweet Tooth's dad, because Sweet Tooth is Needles Kane. And depending on which version that you go through, hold on. I think it may be 2 that it makes it. The father of Sweet Tooth is Charlie Kane. Yeah. Dark Tooth.
Yeah, he's in Twisted Metal 2, right?
I'm pretty sure he's in 2. I can't remember which one where you get to see his name. That was the thing.
Twisted Metal 2, it's you fight Dark Tooth and then you fight like just the skull flying around.
Mm-hmm. So it's a really interesting series. And I kind of always have liked that it's like a collection of stories where all of them are just like you seeing someone go through the Calypso and then getting their final wish of what they want granted. And it's always some twisted, perverse version of what they actually wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great time. It's funny because I've actually been not playing as much games lately, in part because I decided to start rewatching the original Yu-Gi-Oh anime.
Oh,
And the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga is really weird because it's kind of like playing
super
games
dark.
and having things work out in weird, twisted, dark ways that aren't what you think of the American, dub / very censored version that came over here. We've been watching. We got into the beginning of Battle City for anyone who knows about that, and there's the duel with Arcane, where it's clearly saw blades that they're locked into, and they're saw blades, and as they lose life points, the saw blades come to cut their legs off and kill them.
Jesus Christ.
But in the American version, where they tried censoring the hell out of
Their
it,
kisses.
they just made them. They just drew over the saw blades by making them glowing disc and called them dark energy disc. And if it touches your leg, you get sent to the shadow realm. And my wife was like, "That's clearly a saw blade," and it is. I was telling my wife that the shadow realm is one of the odd examples of censorship trying to make something more kid friendly actually made something more horrifying, in my opinion, because death is death, and you understand what it is to some degree. But trying to make it to where no one dies and instead everyone goes to the shadow realm, it's fucking terrifying, because they describe the shadow realm as a place where your body and mind, really your mind, your soul, whatever you want to call it, goes to for eternity to be tortured with no way out as far as we can tell. That sounds fucking horrifying. But that's what's better for American children. Crazy.
They removed guns from people's hands. This is very interesting.
Bandit Keith just pointing at Pegasus's head. It's like, what? Why would anyone even do that? At that point, just draw the fucking arm off. Just have him talking. If you're going to draw out the gun, just get rid of the whole arm. Just draw it like he's standing with his arm beside him and talking to Pegasus. Because who points at someone like this? When the guys walk in to Kaiba's room and they're like, "Mr. Pegasus wants to talk to you." And they're just both pointing their fingers. It's like, it looks like finger guns, which is even more funny. But these are also the same people that made cigarettes, for kids. They made cigarettes into suckers in One Piece. So
yeah. Sanji's always got a sucker.
Yeah, that's the thing he always says. I'm a big fan of Minion, but there's a lot of cool characters in Twisted Metal 4. And Twisted Metal 4 had a lot of fun gameplay things. There's this level, I think it's the first level of the game, where you can operate this crane and pick cars up and fuck them up. Twisted Metal 4 is a great time. A lot of people didn't like what it did from a story perspective, because there's a lot of Twisted Metal 3 and 4 are both really goofy, and I don't think that. I think both of them are made without David Jaffe at all. They were just like, yeah, this game series is doing well. Let's keep pumping them out.
Let's keep twisting that metal.
Yeah, the first one he came back to was Black, which is a good time. So
yeah, had a lot of fun. Had a lot of frustration. That New York level is awful, but Paris is pretty cool. So
Paris is cool.
Yeah.
Being able to fight, right underneath the Eiffel Tower is pretty sweet.
Fire bombs off the Eiffel Tower.
It is I love the game, and I know it controls like shit, but it's nostalgia city. It's such a cool game.
Yeah, it seemed like if I had more appreciation in my past, I would have liked it. Because even what I did like, I think the biggest reason I started to dislike it was the Amazon level, because it was very difficult, because that's where Minion is. But then you also can't drive into the lava, you get hurt, and the controls are so brutal that I was always in the lava. That one was rough.
Yeah, you go very fast in that game, which is kind of impressive for how old it was on PS1 too. But yeah, is it at least supporting the analog stick in this one?
Yes.
I don't know if that's really better though, because if you didn't go in and fix the game, it's probably just emulating the directional pad onto the analog stick, which is it's rough.
I didn't notice turning being terrible. Reversing was terrible.
Reversing is rough. Twisted Metal's PS3 release, that was just called Twisted Metal. I love the driving in that one. I think that one feels the best to just straight up play. It feels really good. It's like they just looked at a racing game and was like, yeah, racing games have this figured out. Why would we not just borrow that?
Yeah. The rumor is that Fire Sprite is making a new Twisted Metal. All right, hear me out, right? It would take 35 years because this developer takes forever. Give it to Polyphony.
It's funny because the team that went on to make Polyphony or become Polyphony in name actually made Motor Tune Grand Prix, which was, in a sense, like a kart racing style game, even though it was like real tracks and characters. And there was car combat in it in a way because it was, you crash a box, you get a power up and you can shoot it.
Crashing
so
boxes.
It's not super out of their historical wheelhouse.
Listen, all I'm saying, Jim Ryan walks in there and he's like, all right, guys, we'll give you the budget to take pictures under 100 more cars. You guys can mold tires on every car for the next game, but you have to make us a Twisted Metal in VR.
Oh, dude. VR Twisted Metal where it's first-person perspective would be kind of sick. I also imagine it would be really hard because part of the way that Twisted Metal works is that you can see around you because I don't know if you made it. I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious if someone's been able to figure that out.
Because it's 360, right? So you can you can look all the way around, or you hit a button and it pops out. But let me have a racing wheel. 10 out of 10, like full pedals and everything. I'm in.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
And if I don't know if you've ever seen, like actual car, like racing car wheels have got all these different buttons and crap on them, which you could easily be like, yeah, this is buttons for different. This is my super. This is my heat-seeking missile.
Here's my napalm.
Yeah, and I love that idea because realistically, there's so many buttons on that racing controller that you could just have a fucking blast. Yeah. It'd be really fun.
That's the biggest selling point.
If nothing else, someone needs to make a VR car combat game.
100%. 100%. I'd love to buy VR and have the wheel and the pedals and just be like, yo, Dad, you got to try this. It'd be so sick. I don't even know how much I would play it, but I have a feeling my dad would play that more than I did.
I'm telling you right now, when you do finally buy PSVR and you have your built-in catalog of games I've been buying for it, Synapse included now, then I'm going to fuck you up in mini golf because on one of the courses we did the first 9. So who knows if I would have kept it up, but we ended the first 9. I was at a -3 or a -2, which is I just,
immaculate.
I had a hole in one. Yeah, I was hitting birdies left and right. I had a good time.
You don't hit birds. That's fucked up.
Yeah, you don't hit birdies. What the fuck, man? So yeah, I'm excited to play that again. I actually was actively sad that the only way I sold my Oculus Quest 2, I should have kept it because I could have bought this game on Oculus Quest. It's
gotten good
crossplay, and me and Hannah could have played together. It's that fun.
Oh, that would be fun. Yeah.
But now I'd have to either buy another Oculus Quest 2 or buy another PlayStation 5 and another PSVR.
The second one. She can earn trophies for you too. Look at that. You just become a farm. You're a VR content farm.
Knock them out, please. Left and right. There's actually a lot of VR trophies too, or VR platinums that are fairly easy.
Yeah.
That I've just never gotten around to. But all right, those are the games. We got a couple of things left here on the news. Thank you for the question, Stingray. Chris, you got to play Black. When you do a Sweet Tooth Super and you turn into like a transformer and you're running around as a fucking Sweet Tooth mech, it's awesome. Yeah,
does it have Lena the Plug in it?
Yes, yes, it does. She's
Adam
in everything
22
now.
Is the boss at the end. He's like, it's just him in that fucking hotel room chair that goes in the corner facing the bed, and he's just shooting at you. It's a very specific joke.
Jokes aside, Andrew Tate would be hilarious in a Twisted Metal game.
Dude, I would play a car combat game with just toxic right-wing personalities. Oh
I would
my
just play
God.
one where it's just all political, like all toxically political personalities. That would be fucking
It's just
funny.
fucking Steven Crowder is in there just shooting out bars
That's
from his chest
the
or
whole
whatever it
premise
is.
of the show is that this is how we will finally decide which political alignment is right. And the person who plays as the Calypso in this is just like some libertarian dude who's like, yes, we'll get rid of them all.
It's Gary Johnson, just like, I'm doing it.
That would be so good.
Oh my God.
Chris, we got to make games, man. What are
Ben
we doing with our
Shapiro's.
lives here?
This has potential.
His super would be he has a bobblehead of himself on his car, and whenever he goes, he just starts talking very fast, and the words start coming out and hitting the enemies. Yeah.
Instead of a machine gun, he's just got weaponized words.
Yeah. Oh, dude. I love that. That's just such a good time. It's anything that you can kind of just have, like, take the piss out of for a second is always a fun time. All right. We have the next piece of news here right before we get to the final and I guess main thing we're going to spend time talking about. We have Toomba and the Gex Trilogy are coming to modern consoles alongside some others by way of limited run games and the Carbon engine, a tool set that helps emulators interact with modern hardware. So the Carbon engine's been used a few times for a few different games. I don't have the list in front of me, but it's a very cool way for them to try and bring new games forward without having to really do much work on them. So the idea is that the Carbon engine is telling the PlayStation 5 or Xbox or Switch or whatever how to properly emulate the game so that it's basically a one-on-one.
These are the first
You're
games
playing
using that collection, using the Carbon engine.
So is there another? I swore there was a game. Maybe
Jurassic
they were just talking
Park
about
Classic, Gex Trilogy, and Tomba.
Yeah, I knew they were talking about
and then
this.
there's
So
like
yeah,
some
thank you,
house
Chris.
game,
I must just be wrong.
Alone in the House or something like that they talked about, bringing that forward.
Oh yeah, see, that's what I thought. This isn't the first. River City Girls Zero and Shantae.
Really?
The
The
Game
only
Boy Color,
thing that
yeah.
IGN
I
has
knew it
listed
existed.
Is Jurassic Park and Gex and stuff.
Yeah, so apparently that's because those are 4 games that are coming from PlayStation. So currently the Carbon engine supports NES, SNES, Genesis, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Game Gear, Master System, and with the release of these games, it'll now support PlayStation, Sega CD, and Mega CD. So
Gotcha.
the Mega CD, Sega CD are just various regional names. So yeah, the games they already have that have shipped with it, there's more than just this, but these are the top ones, is Shantae and River City Girls Zero. So pretty cool. It's a nice idea cool. Because sometimes the problems you run into is if you try and just port the game, you run into a lot of issues, whereas sometimes just emulating it the way it was originally built helps with compatibility, not messing things up. So this is a cool idea. Gex is a beloved thing. A lot of people have been wanting him to come back, and I don't think you're going to get him coming back in any kind of new game. I would love to see it. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I think the most financially obvious way is just to bring back the old games and let people relive those glory days again.
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. A game that is truly a Gex game in spirit and everything today, I don't know. If it's being made today, that game is going to get a hit. With
we would start hearing about species gaps and all this kind of stuff. A 41-year-old lizard can't be in the same scene as the 61-year-old actor. It's going to be crazy.
That Mission Impossible thing. I was laughing. Blake shared it to Twitter. Like, she's fucking 41.
Yeah. I'm like, guys, what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
And what was more funny is I read the article out of curiosity. And I laughed so hard that the article was like, it should be noted that they're not always the love interest. And I'm like, so you're just saying a 41-year-old shouldn't be able to act with a 61-year-old?
Yeah, basically.
That's basically what they said. I was like, this is stupid. Wild times indeed. But the leading lady can't be so much younger.
No.
It would be funny to have a modern game where it's do the modern deconstructive take where it's Gex as an older lizard now. They Max Payne 3 it. And he's like reevaluating his whole life and everything he's done. He's living in Brazil.
He's a maggotaholic and just can't do anything.
Oh, dude, that would be super funny. like he's trying, and like so you'll see him like start to say like a slip of the he like stops himself. He's like, that life's behind me. He's got like a grumbled voice. He's got like a beard.
The game ends setting up a sequel with him opening a sunglasses case.
Oh no. A stripper cop knocks on his door.
Yeah.
We need you, Gex.
Gex, it's
back
time.
at it one more time. It's Gex time. Oh man, I do love those games, but this is one of those things where I think a large selection of people, and I say this with love, are going to play this game and realizing that they do like the game insofar as the nostalgia, but what they really loved about the game was the version of it that lived in their memory.
Absolutely. That's all old games.
Well, but there's some old games that you replay and you're like, okay, this is still a fantastic, like, dude, even though I hadn't played Shadow of the Colossus in forever, whenever I played that remake, I was like, this game is still fucking incredible.
Yeah.
But that's because it's designed in a way. Well, no, but I even mean if you remade Gex for what it was and all you did was make the graphics better and maybe fix the controls, but you kept the core of the gameplay loop and everything the same, you'd be like, this is kind of a rough game.
I just hope we get Blinks.
I heard someone the other day was talking about replaying, and it's funny because I was like, Chris did that, but someone was talking about replaying Infinite for the first time since it came out, and they were like, I still like aspects of the game, but I resent a lot of the game because of this and poor writing and confusing blah blah blah. And I think it's so funny because he's saying like he loved it so much when it first came out, but now that he's playing it again and looking back on it, that there's a lot of problems with the game is. And I'm like, it's funny because Chris was like, yeah, this game's still fucking awesome. and I haven't played it in so long, I don't know, but I feel like I would land on this game's still fucking awesome.
What game are you talking about?
BioShock Infinite.
Oh,
I may have not said that. My bad. But, BioShock Infinite. And we got on the conversation about playing old games and if it's better to have a game that you love just be a game you don't ever replay so that you can continue to love it in perpetuity. And in my head, I was like, yeah, but I've loved Infamous 2 for years. And when I replayed it, I was like, yeah, this game is still... It's perfect. It's everything that Infamous should and could be, and it's everything that the follow-up game wasn't. And if they made a new one now, I'd hope they'd look to this one. So it's funny. Not all gaming heroes hold up to the test of time, but some of them do.
I just think you
Ocarina of Time's still a classic game. Like, it's still fun.
I think just sometimes, like when I play old games, I'm like, I recognize what I'm playing. And I think that's part of keeping it in check. Like, I played a little bit of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, and like it's not great, but it's really good for what I'm playing. You know?
Yeah. Like playing the Wolverine game that I still have that you let me borrow, but playing the X-Men Origins Wolverine from Raven, that game is clearly a PS3 game.
Yeah,
but it's fun,
absolutely fun.
Like the story is shit, but the story of the movie is shit. And if anything, the story in the game may be better than the story in the movie actually. But it's not very good. It's just you kind of take it for what it is and have a good time. So, I mean, I'm not messed up about it. All right, we're down to the last thing here, and that is that Activision and Blizzard, rather, I guess in this case, Microsoft and Xbox have won the FTC trial against the FTC to allow them to move forward with the Activision Blizzard purchase, at least in America. That means that's a pretty big win. The only blockage, railroad, whatever you want to say, the only thing that's in the way right now is the CMA. And the CMA have already kind of worked with Microsoft to not go to trial, start revisiting how they can get this through, and revisit some of how Microsoft will reapproach that so that they don't have to do that. And we may see this go. Now, part of this is that originally, this most recent Tuesday, the 18th, I guess, was the original deadline for the merger to go through. They have announced today that they extended that, and they have until October to close it now, which I don't think that they would have extended it if they didn't think it was going to go through. And I think that there's another piece of evidence that makes you think that they seem pretty damn confident. if it does fail for some reason, Activision Blizzard now stands to make $4.5 billion.
Yeah.
If Microsoft has to back out of the purchase, which is a considerable step up from what, if I recall, was $1 billion if they, almost $1 billion if they backed out of it before. So, Chris, with that, we reached a point of seeing some things that were happening in the backside of Xbox Live and seeing how some old Call of Duty games and whatnot were being prepped and primed to be available on Game Pass, or at least available on Xbox. Seeing some of these lobbies open back up and whatnot for some older games get active again. Now that we're kind of on the other side of it, we've been not talking a lot about it because there wasn't a lot to talk about. But now that we're reaching a point where it genuinely seems like there's no reason it won't close, how are you feeling with everything that's happened? Sony getting a 10-year deal for Call of Duty, finally doing the thing that they refused to do for so long, being the only people that really held out. What do you make of this, and how do you think it's going to impact the industry at this particular standpoint?
I guess in terms of Call of Duty, I personally think this was pretty good work by Jim Ryan, honestly. Short of blocking the deal, it's kind of everything you could have asked for from him. Like, I know people are really stuck on the they had an agreement for all Activision titles for 3 years, and that they all could have been on the PlayStation platform. But I think it's pretty clear that to them, 10 years is more valuable than 3 years or 10 years of Call of Duty is more valuable than everything. I think I would agree with that.
What else does Activision really do besides Blizzard? And
which
I get that.
Their game's out.
Yeah. The game that everyone was waiting for on them is out.
And it's Blizzard. There's not going to be another game before December 31st, 2027, which was when it would have run out, according to those emails. They take forever. So, by the time you get in that, you might get some stuff like Crash Team Rumble and maybe a new Tony Hawk right around the tail end or something along those lines. But who's to say that Microsoft doesn't just put out everything in the immediate future and they go, oh, you've got a Crash Bandicoot that's about 2.5 years out. How about you make it 3 years and 1 day out? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's no, I think just guaranteeing yourself Call of Duty is kind of the right move here.
Yeah, and like you said, 10 years of the biggest seller and the biggest thing that they can see continued revenue on. And the reason they want Call of Duty is not only for the game selling, but for all the microtransaction income that it brings in. And because every single time that someone does something, they get that 30% rather than that just single time. So when you look at it that way, I can see that as well. So if we're looking at this strictly from what Sony were doing, I don't necessarily know that Jim Ryan thinks that he's failed. I think what he was trying to do is just find a way to try and weaken that position and make people question and get in a position to where at the end of it all, they still get a version of what they want. If I go out to just me as an individual, as a consumer, someone who thinks, okay, maybe I won't have access to Activision Blizzard titles outside of Call of Duty from the day of closure onward, how does that impact me? And I think that there's a version of, there's a time period in which I could see that and be like, man, that sucks. But because Activision has become so Call of Duty driven, I may have a 1 or 2 games in the next 5 years where I'm like, damn, that's kind of cool. But I don't think it's going to be something that I feel as much as I feel like I'm going to see this with Bethesda's games. Like, I think there's going to be more games from ZeniMax's side where I'm like, damn, that kind of sucks. I really would have liked to have played that on my console of choice. I can still play it. I have an Xbox, but I think, Starfield would have been cool to play on PlayStation 5. And these are different purchases, so I know it's a little different. So if we want to look at it from a publisher standpoint, playing the next thing that comes from Arcane, that's other than Redfall, hopefully is something great. And now I have to go, maybe I won't see that. Playing whatever comes next from, which we already see that with Hi-Fi Rush, but whatever comes next from the team behind Ghostwire Tokyo, you have that problem going on. Whatever comes next from Machine Games, which we know is at least Indiana Jones, maybe more than that. And you keep going down that list. I think I could see more times where I'm hit by Bethesda than I am Activision, but that's just because Activision has become an empire built on the back of Call of Duty. And that means that 90% of what they do and what they develop and what they worry about is Call of Duty.
Correct. It's like everyone getting really hyped to like, oh, now maybe Microsoft will have Raven make a Singularity game. It's like, no, the fuck they won't.
Singularity didn't sell well when it came out. But yeah. Like, don't get me wrong. As a fan, I would love to see them make another Singularity. That game is awesome.
Sure.
But that game didn't sell well even when it came out. Not well enough to go, yeah, let's take this team off of Call of Duty, which sucks. Because I'll tell you what I would want to see is take High Moon Studios off of being a Call of Duty support studio and let them get back to making games. But here's the problem. The High Moon that made the games that I loved, Deadpool, the Transformers games, yeah, the people who made those games that wanted to make original titles, they're not there. They left. Right. That's a studio in name only. And at some point you have to give up the ghosts and just say, they're not there.
Right.
So what does it matter?
They all went to fucking Respawn. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I just, in terms of what it means for PlayStation, is I think Jim Ryan said it well himself. We'll be more than fine. And they will be. I've maintained, Phil Spencer's maintained, guest of the show or friend of the show, Luke Lore, has maintained that Xbox lost the most important generation that they could not lose because digital libraries are far too important. So I don't think Sony ever really loses their position of power, which in terms of that, I don't think Call of Duty comes off PlayStation. Just like Overwatch 3 is not coming off PlayStation. Just like people talking about, oh, what if WoW finally hits consoles? Are you actually gonna sit here and tell me that WoW is gonna skip PlayStation? Maybe, but 100 million consoles, they're gonna be like, nah, the 20 million we got is good. No, that's always been the thing with Activision. Is like you're gonna lose the next Crash Bandicoot probably, which is wild. You're gonna lose the next Spyro
because Crash Bandicoot 4 was awesome.
Yeah, you're gonna lose Tony Hawk. You're going to lose Hexen. You're going to lose Prototype. But you're not going to lose Blizzard. You're not going to lose Call of Duty. It's just, it's not financially feasible because of the types of games they are. Now, if Blizzard makes a single-player Warcraft game, you might not get that on PlayStation. But the games like Diablo 4, which are monumental titles, they'll come. Even if they come late, they'll be on PlayStation. In my opinion.
I am curious because I think Starfield would have been that too, and clearly that's not happening. I thought it was really interesting that they are looking at the business side of it again, right? Microsoft evaluated that Starfield and Indiana Jones would sell 5 million copies each, or I think it was 5 million, which is kind of crazy because I don't know that number really is right.
Oh, I think for Starfield it could very well be more.
I think that's what I'm saying. I think Starfield alone could probably have been 10 million units.
Well, I think they had said 10 million together. So
yeah,
or each.
I thought it was 10 million total, but I don't know. Who knows? Either way, yeah, it's an interesting thing because you look at it and go, well, I mean, they're clearly going through what they view as the value of this, and in their mind, they've viewed this as we'll take the hit because the value that we'll get from Game Pass subscribers and blah 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 will be beneficial to them. And with all of the money that Xbox is spending on this and all of this stuff they're doing where it's like, well, we're going to do this. We're going to forego releasing on everything so that we can get the boost to Game Pass subscribers and it's going to work. I do wonder, as someone who has an Xbox, interacts with it, and interacts with Game Pass as a subservice, genuine question, no hate, no stank, no nothing. What is Microsoft's plan if that doesn't work? What is Microsoft's plan if Starfield, one of the biggest, probably very expensive games to come out in a long time, comes out on Game Pass and doesn't really move the Game Pass needle at all? And I'm not saying I think that will happen, but what if it does? What do they do? Because, if your entire thing of why you chose to forego a release on PlayStation for that game was because you did internal numbers, saw that it was at least large enough to be in the multiple millions, which, any game can hope to get multiple millions on any console. And you go, it's okay, we can take the hit because we're going to see that what we lose out in income from PlayStation, we gain back in Game Pass subs and Game Pass talk. And what do you do if it doesn't work? And there's a lot of questions that people need to look at now. And I don't think that the answer is that Microsoft's going to divest themselves from gaming or close or anything. So I'm not saying this and that you should fear that Bethesda and Activision will have been bought by a company that will one day close its doors and just let those die with them. I don't think that's what would happen. But it does, as someone who's on there, like, my curiosity comes up. What happens? What do they do? Do they continue to raise the price of Game Pass like we're seeing with Netflix, where they saw subscriber growth kind of come to a halt? So they stop password sharing and they start raising the price of the service left and right because they still have to spend more money to try and keep the people they already have invested. But also in doing so, they need to make more money off of the people who are invested while hopefully trying to bring in some new people. It's a somewhat risky business model because of how much money they're pumping into trying to make this work in the long run. Genuine curiosity. What happens? I don't know if any reasonable person knows the answer.
No, you can't.
That's not Microsoft,
It's impossible to know. I have trouble believing in the big bet of Game Pass. And I think the most concerning thing for me is the big bet of Game Pass is taking off one of the biggest money makers for, well, I guess it's really not. They own the biggest money maker for them in terms of a game, so who knows, but putting that game straight into Game Pass, and then I don't know how that sustains itself. I genuinely don't understand it. And it's just, it's Microsoft, and that's the answer, right? The answer is it's Microsoft, but I don't think that's good for the Xbox brand, and it's not good for Activision necessarily. Well, because Microsoft can take from one account to pay the other doesn't mean they're going to do that forever. I had a conversation with someone and they were like, well, it's Microsoft. They can just absorb all of it. And I'm like,
but no company wants to lose forever.
Exactly. You can't keep pumping. Like, say they buy Take-Two now for probably $100 billion at this point, right? Who knows? Probably not that much. But they buy Take-Two, and then Phil's got to look at Satya and be like, we're spending $100 billion on stuff that's losing money, but eventually 80 million people will subscribe to Game Pass. Okay, is that enough? When all of these games are going in their day one? That seems crazy.
I think, and I know where Luke was coming from on it, but you spoke of Luke coming into the show, and he talked about he thinks one day Sony will basically match Xbox. And the more I've thought about that, in particular with that thought process of, well, what if it doesn't work? I think the problem that you run into is I am unsure how reasonably Microsoft and Xbox specifically would be able to come back from doing away with Game Pass or changing Game Pass so fundamentally that it's no longer that value proposition that they've been toting it as. If they ever have to stop that and reevaluate how their money's going in because it's just not turning the fortunes the way they thought they were going to, then you kind of go through that. But I look at PlayStation and go, yeah, I don't think PlayStation could come back. They don't have a backup. They don't have something that can support them for a bit if that doesn't work. And Nintendo's got a lot of money, but I don't think Nintendo does either. So when you start looking at the gaming landscape, I mean, if anyone was going to take this chance, I think the only one who could was Microsoft. But I don't necessarily know that means that everyone else is going to join them and jump into the bed. And if it does, it's probably going to come off the back of the death of the big three as we know them. And that doesn't have to be an inherently bad thing. But it's like the only other people who I know that may have the money to do that would have been Google and Amazon. And Google are already They already
Apple.
got in and got out. Yeah, maybe. I mean, how big, and I say this with a true sense of ignorance, how big of a company is Apple in comparison to a Microsoft?
I remember reading the
Or to
Steve
a
Jobs
Google.
biography, and they talked about in that book about how Apple has billions just in the bank.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like ready to spend. And here's the thing, right? And this is a lot of modern stuff, you know, coming into my head, right? But if you look at the recent news that Bob Iger is looking to sell Disney, right? Apple might be interested in buying Disney, right?
Yeah.
Could Apple not also merge with Sony or invest in or buy Sony? And then now Disney, Apple, and Sony are all under the same Microsoft, under the same company, right? That seems like somewhere this industry could go, which is a weird place to have taken that, but it's just interesting. Think about that. Sony is now making Marvel games just for themselves, and there's no reason not to. You know, all of this kind of stuff happens. There's a lot of ways this could go.
So looking at it, just for anybody who may have been interested, Apple in comparison to Google is valued at $309 billion. Apple's valued at $309.5 million, or billion rather. So I think, yeah, I mean,
Microsoft is trillions, right?
I think. Let's find out. Good Lord, $2.64 trillion.
See, and that's the problem,
and
right?
That's what I go into. Like, I still go through who else in the tech sphere at all, who else besides Microsoft really has the money to do that? I don't know. That's crazy.
Meta,
Sony is valued at $120.1 billion.
Yeah.
That's considerably lower than
Trillions,
the competition. Well, that's considerably lower than Disney. Disney's $159.5 billion.
Yeah.
That's insane. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't even... Nintendo... let's see where they are. $8.33 trillion.
Nintendo is 8.33 trillion. Is that what you said?
Yeah, but it is JPY, so I wonder if it's 8.33 trillion USD or if that's
if that's yen, and yen is like 0.003 of the dollar, or 0.07 maybe.
Let me find out. 8.3 trillion yen to USD. See if, yeah, 59 billion. That sounds a lot more accurate.
That makes way more sense.
So they're valued in at 59.12 billion, which makes them considerably smaller than Sony. Which Sony's got a lot of other stuff, and Nintendo actually has a fairly good chunk of other stuff too. But yeah, now I know this is a weird thing, but last one I'm going to look: Netflix company value $212.31 billion. And Netflix, we're seeing kind of scramble in the face of so much competition. So I don't know. My bigger question is a lot of people look at this and they think that this has to be setting a precedent for how the industry will go moving forward. And I just don't know if that's the case. I genuinely don't think anyone else can afford to do this unless they grow at a crazy amount. Now, the flip side of this is Microsoft would be fine if they ever had to really undo it, because when you own all that IP and all these developers and you go back, if you're releasing your game on everything and you're just acting as the publishing holder, I mean, you've got a lot of money in hand and you've got a lot of places bringing money in. So maybe that's their thing, is that we just go back to being a publisher. And I don't think they would want to do that, but maybe that is what their backside is. Hey, if Game Pass does not work, we will just now become a publisher who owns all these sub-publishers. And that have some of the most iconic,
that would make a ton of sense. Make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And listen, here's the thing with the Activision Blizzard thing. If we can just be real for a second, I've been looking at buying a Series X recently. Like,
Yeah, I have one.
yeah,
And I bought it for a completely. I bought it to play Oblivion 4K, which is a stupid reason to buy a console. If I'm being honest, a $500 console.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. The reason I want to buy it is because I want to play Modern Warfare 2, like real bad.
There you go.
But
so
they're getting to a point where it's not a worthless purchase to spend the $500. Sure. It never was, but as a PlayStation gamer before Bethesda and certainly before ABK. I didn't need an Xbox. Now I do. Or now I want to at least have the option there.
Well, it's funny because you still don't for new releases, right? Because you can still play them on PC. And that's the weird balancing act that they have. If Xbox was still, but it doesn't make sense for Game Pass to be limited to console. It makes more sense for it to be console, phone, game, system, and all that. PC, rather. So to that end, I don't know. It's just such a weird idea to see here. Do you think, switching gears a little bit before we move on to the questions, some people think that Sony's answer to this has to be a retaliatory act of buying someone. Do you think you agree with that? Do you think that's even in the wheelhouse of what Sony's actually looking at? Or do you think Sony's just like, yeah, we're going to double down and still just do what we've been doing?
I've had a sneeze building for like 3 minutes. And
I've visually seen it.
I think they're gonna have to buy something.
I would say this, but do you think they're only buying out of retaliation to this, or do you think they're going to announce a buy that they were already going to do, or they were already looking into prior to this?
I mean, I think there's possibility for both, right? If they announce tomorrow that they bought CD Projekt Red, I'd be like, that's retaliation. But if they announce tomorrow, hey, we bought Ember Labs, I'd be like, okay. You know, it depends who. Even Square Enix, I wouldn't necessarily be like, yeah, that's retaliation. It's probably retaliation, but sure, makes sense. I don't see why they'd want publishers. If it was me, I would make strategic picks. There's publishers that I would think they should buy, absolutely, but I don't know that they should. I think, focus on your needs. Go, okay, we're going to buy a Larian. And how much does it take to get Jason West out of retirement to run a studio for a shooter, right? Buy Larian, be a WRPG guy, get it, make a team with him. Go to the source, make a third-person shooter, cover-based shooter with Cliffy B. Like, I would rather see interesting shit than them be like, yeah, we bought Capcom. Suck my dick, Phil.
See,
like, that's
what
boring.
I was going to say. I think the only thing that would feel retaliatory is if they bought a publisher. CD Projekt Red isn't really a publisher in that sense. So I think I could see them, like, they're at what, 3.65 billion, 3.56 billion, somewhere around there. But point being, that feels like Bungie. That feels like a Bungie purchase, which I don't think is necessarily retaliatory in any real sense.
CD
I think
Projekt
that's filling a gap. 3.5 billion. Okay. So point of all of that being, the Bungie buy didn't feel retaliatory to me. It felt, we have a hole in what we can create that we need to fill, and we have a real need for it. And I think if you look at what they don't have in RPGs and what Xbox does have, I think a CD Projekt Red, even at $4 billion, doesn't feel retaliatory. It feels like they recognize an area that they don't really have a great answer for, and this is an easy way to pick that up and pull it in. Mm-hmm. And then I think you look at, like you say, buying Ember Labs, which is like, okay, and that would be significantly cheaper, and it'd be like we're adding to the type of games we're already known for. And then you have, maybe if they were to buy Larian, like that would also probably be, and I'm not saying they will, but I think the only thing that would really seem retaliatory to me is if they were like, yeah, we're buying Ubisoft. Because, Ubisoft's been talking about being poised to sell.
I don't think Ubisoft would be retaliatory.
If they tried buying Ubisoft, or if they tried buying Take-Two, or if they even tried buying Capcom, then I could feel like it's a little retaliatory. Square Enix would not surprise me. That would just seem like this has been in the making and not necessarily because of anything. It just makes sense. Yeah, but that's about it. I think buying a publisher is the only thing that would feel scale wise retaliatory.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like
we're in M&A already, so buying anybody right now kind of feels like, well, it's not retaliation, it's preemptive striking. It's you try to buy so no one else can beat you to it.
Yeah, I don't even think anything is retaliation right now, because you can't retaliate against a $69 billion purchase. You can only look at that,
because that would probably be a similarly valued purchase somewhere in that ballpark, I would imagine.
But here's the thing. Here's the question I've had for myself and listeners who listen to other podcasts. I will probably send this question in, but it's an interesting conversation for the two of us.
Take-Two's only $25.74 billion.
Yeah, one of the tweets I sent you has all that information. It has EA, Take-Two, Nexon, all of them. At what point, like, let's say Sony goes out and buys Sega and Capcom, and fuck it, throw in Ubisoft in there for good measure. At what point do we get to a future where Phil Spencer has to call Jim Ryan and be like, all right, we can't afford to lose Resident Evil. We'll give you Bethesda. Right? At what point does he go, I've made inroads with Atlas. You can have Starfield. You can have Elder Scrolls 6, right? Because doesn't this all end up coming back to the games just going everywhere again because it makes the most sense?
Yeah, I don't know. You would think so, but we've not really reached that point on streaming content, and streaming is the same form of business model in a hyper-aggressive take. You don't think so?
We do.
How so?
Okay. So I'm watching Suits for the second time this year.
Sure. It's on Netflix, and I think it's also on Hulu, right?
It got taken off Amazon and put on Netflix. Yeah. So while the original,
but do you notice what I mean? It's not on everything.
No, for sure. But what I'm saying is that while yes, it's not on everything right now, it eventually makes its way to everything. Other than stuff that's been straight up bought out. But again, this is specific, right? Let's say Netflix will always own Breaking Bad, but they can give Suits to Amazon, and Amazon can give them House, right? So this is what we're looking at, where Forza, Gears, Halo.
It's clearly not a good example because it's not like Forza. It's not like Forza is going to come to PlayStation. Let's use an actual third party one. It's not like Starfield's going to come to PlayStation and not be on Xbox during its 10-year on PlayStation.
Right. I'm more just saying,
and it's not like PlayStation will give a game to them and say, well, it's not going to be on ours. We'll just let them have it because they spent enough money. So it's clearly not the closest. But I guess what I was trying to get at there is when you look at TV streaming and what it already is, you kind of have to play musical streaming services bouncing around wherever has what you want to watch, because the dream of the subscription service with Netflix early on, and it was that everything was on Netflix.
Yeah.
And then as competition started to roar up and more people started coming into this space and started buying things up and coming together, then you get HBO with Max, which has become
Max,
just Max because of Discovery, and it's got a bunch of extra stuff now. Then you have Peacock, and you have all the extra stuff that's on because of that. Then you have Disney, Hulu, and Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN, and there's all a bunch of specific to only their places content that you're not going to get everywhere that they made, which makes sense. As well as the flip side of things that were at one point in time pretty much everywhere that now aren't, because Netflix spent $1 billion keeping Friends on Netflix, or you can watch Friends on HBO. So clearly it wasn't an exclusivity. It was just, if you want to be able to have this show on Netflix, you're still going to pay us billions of dollars.
Crazy.
Then you have weird things like South Park, which are the streaming for the series is exclusive to HBO Max, or just Max now, because they bought the rights out to that, or at least a long exclusive contract. And then you have Paramount, which is the parent company that owns all of that, and they get all the specials for South Park. So if you want to watch both, if you want to watch all South Park, you have to have either cable and one subscription service, or you have to have both subscription services.
Well, hear me out. I'm not calling this collusion. I'm not even trying to, but it'll sound like it. Isn't that good for everyone?
In what way? What do you mean?
Because you got one show on Netflix that you like, one show on HBO Max, and 2 shows on Hulu. So you end up keeping all 3 indefinitely. And then you don't know what's going to come off HBO Max. So you keep Netflix in case that goes to Netflix, right? And you keep Hulu in case that show goes to Hulu. So you end up having all 3 of them forever. And then this translates back because we get to a point where Sony and Microsoft own everything. So
you think so,
Game
but
Pass
you bring that up, but realistically, what about Peacock? What about Paramount? What about all these other? What about Amazon Video? What about all these things that you don't have? Because no one is going to have all of them. It's just pointless. Eventually, you're going to go, I don't care about that enough to pay for that. It's exactly where I'm at Disney Plus. My wife keeps being like, we should get Disney Plus again. I'm like, if you want to pay for it, you have at thee. There is nothing on Disney Plus that I care enough about.
Yeah.
To pay that extra. I already pay for Netflix, and that's it. I pay for Amazon because I pay for Amazon Prime.
Right. So you have
and
Amazon.
I get Prime Video.
Yeah.
And I was always going to do that. But it's like past that, it's like I only have Max because it's included in my cell. And I like Max, but I only have it because it's included in my phone. Yeah. And I have Hulu, which I'm watching Yu-Gi-Oh! On, thanks to Blake. Shout out. Goes to Blake Popes. Appreciate you, big dog. So yeah, no, I think a lot of people just get obstinate and will go, like, maybe I'll have 3 Max, but it starts to feel ridiculous to have more than 3 $15 a month subscription services.
Yeah, but that's also part of it, though. They're not all that expensive. Like, I get what you're saying about Disney, but Disney's like $6. At least it was. Apple TV is $4.99 last I checked.
I think Hulu is $6, but Disney is not.
It's Disney's definitely. It was when it launched $6.99 at the very least. But
we find out.
My point is more
$8 a month for ads.
Okay, there you go. It's fucking $8, right? But my point is more
$10.99 without ads.
At least in this scenario, there's only 2, right? So with the consolidation, you end up having and paying for both because why wouldn't you have Plus and Game Pass? You know what I mean?
It's just assuming that all publishers are bought by one of the 2.
Right, exactly. Which is not what's going to happen. Tencent's going to buy something.
Nor should it be.
Well, the problem is,
I don't know.
At a certain point, would you rather Tencent owns half of these or Microsoft and Sony just own both of them?
I would rather whatever the larger amount of people is the better. But you know.
Do you have any thoughts on what's your opinion on what Sony should buy if they were going to try and keep up?
I actually think the answer, and I've already technically said it, but I think CD Projekt Red is an obvious get for Sony because it fills their Western RPG gap.
Is that it?
They don't have.
Because we're in agreement on CD Projekt, although I'd prefer Larian because that's just me.
It depends. I think if Baldur's Gate 3 becomes some kind of crazy smash success, I think you might see Sony going, maybe that could be our Obsidian. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's a, hey, buying CD Projekt is our Bethesda.
Is our Bethesda.
But Larian is our Obsidian.
Yeah. Listen, and at that point,
and that sounds retaliatory in that sense, but it's more of the role they fill.
Yeah. So I've had thoughts about this for a while. That's why I mean,
Ember Lab definitely comes into place. The only other real person, and we've been saying this already, is Square Enix, but they're in Square Enix's pocket already. They don't need to buy them unless they're worried about losing them to someone who would try and make them exclusive.
And that's what it seems to be is, the reason to buy Square Enix is to just make sure they never come to Xbox. That's it. And that's why Square Enix of all of them, I think, is the most retaliatory. Because that's literally you telling Xbox players, we're going to make sure you never play Final Fantasy, by the way. Like, you're never going to touch Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Unless you come here.
Well, who do you think they're going to buy? Or who do you think they should buy at the very least?
If it was me, I think I would agree with your CD Projekt take. And then my honest one, and I know it's probably impossible, but I would tell them to look at it, to try and figure something out with EA. And that's for one reason and one reason only.
Shooter games.
Respawn.
Yeah.
Imagine Sony. Okay, this is the thing. And they would immediately have a foothold back in it, right? They go and they announce, we've bought EA. We're leaving everything the same, except we're giving Respawn $100 million for Titanfall 3. and it's in the Decima engine. Are you fucking joking? Shit my pants. That would make all the Horizon games we're about to get worth it, bro.
No, really, really looking at it, EA is probably the only other publisher who has shooter game chops.
Yeah.
That they could pick up. And that is the only gap that has not been immediately identified. Bungie technically is that, but from what we're seeing, Bungie is not necessarily, Bungie's more spearheading their live service. Now, here's the thing. The only reason I didn't immediately jump to that is because a lot of the developers they're working with, and some of which they've already bought, are clearly working on shooter games. Now, that doesn't mean that they come along with pedigree necessarily, but they're working on shooter games regardless. Mm-hmm. So they're going to get it. I think past that, instead of outright purchases, I think just working with developers that have a history, and go to Cliffy B and say, come up with a pitch for a your type of third person shooter game. Figure out what you want to do. Get with us. We'll see if we think it's going to be worth it. Because you can't look at Cliffy B and not think, well, yeah, Lawbreakers really wasn't a hit, and it wasn't, and it was overly invested into. That doesn't mean it's a bad game. I didn't play it. I don't want to say that. But point being is that it did not financially do what it needed to do.
Well, and the question is,
Sony would have to look at that.
If Sony is behind the game, funding him and helping him, is Lawbreakers a better game? Or is Lawbreakers, even as it was, more viable, being a big Sony exclusive? Probably.
Maybe. Yeah. Some people I've heard think that Lawbreakers was actually a good game that just came out at the wrong time and with the wrong model behind it, which is probably true to some degree. A lot of people liked Radical Heights, the game they did right after Lawbreakers, when they were kind of just trying to figure out something to stay alive for a bit. So who knows? But the question is it better to spend money on partnerships or things that you can get more long-term ownership out of? And I don't know. The part of me that doesn't want the entire gaming industry to come down to a couple of people, says that partnerships are better because it doesn't lock anything down. It just says, hey, for this game or for this, whatever, we're going to do it. We'll just have to see. We're seeing that impact with Japan and how that's been very important. Even if it wasn't going on one system, just having a lot of Japanese games locked to PlayStation and Nintendo has already been kind of damning for Xbox for a long time. Mm-hmm. So you look at that and you think, flip side question, what would Microsoft's next obvious purchase be? Sega Sammy?
Yeah. Which, for me, that would put Sega on the top of my radar if I'm Sony. I'm not losing Persona for anything.
It's funny because Sony doesn't really need help with Japanese games, but if they don't
need help with
up
Japanese
these places,
gamers, I think they do need help with Japanese games.
Well, in what way do you mean help? Just so I know we're kind of speaking in the same way. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't think they make games that appeal to the Japanese audience. They don't make JRPGs.
They partner. And that's what I'm getting at. The fear is that they are already locked in with Japanese gamers and Japanese games.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't scoop these things up, they run into the risk of losing the thing that gives them a connection with Japanese gamers and that long history of Japanese games. In large part because whether or not they were putting out good things, they don't even have a development studio outside of Asobo in Japan anymore. It's just like they're completely divested from it, other than the Astrobot people. Which Astrobot was great, but if every other Japanese publisher that you interact with gets bought out, what are you doing suddenly? Mm-hmm. I think that's part of why Sony's investing so heavily into like China Hero Project and India Hero Project, and looking at places that are coming up and going, at worst, we can have interesting games from foreign countries that are up and coming that will have unique takes on gaming as nature of how their region interacted with them and how gaming was with them in that region. So who knows? We'll see. Any final thoughts that you kind of want to get out on this before we move on to the questions?
No, I think we're good on questions.
Okay. Well, moving into the questions, which you can ask by going over to our social media. You can find us on Twitter at Triangle SQD. You can find us at Facebook in a group called Triangle Square to PlayStation Podcast. If you ask to enter into there, I will gladly let you in. Or you can find us in our favorite place, the Discord, which you can find by clicking the link in the description below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on podcast services. And we ask you guys to give us questions for each episode, just like Pork Chops here did. He says, what is one or more genre of game that you once loved and now you are just plain sick of seeing? For me, it would be open world sandbox games. I used to go all out for their style of game, but now I'm finding the market oversaturated with them and would prefer a nice linear story and map. Hypocritically, is that even a word? I'm beyond excited for Spider-Man 2. Chris, do you have a specific genre that you feel like you once loved and you've kind of fallen out of favor with? Or one that you think is just oversaturated, the genre, maybe you still love the genre, but you feel like it's so commonplace now that you're less wowed by it than you once were?
Open world action games with RPG elements.
Ooh. It is funny because he says open world / sandbox games. If we're being honest, I think that's it.
Yeah.
But all open world games do get diluted by open world games, action games with RPG elements. It's funny because that's pretty much the only genre I would really say that I've fallen out of favor with. I mean, to some degree, if I want to go back out, I do have a much harder time, even if it doesn't make sense, playing turn-based games than I once did. When I was young, I liked turn-based games and I played them often, but that was also kind of what you had. You didn't have a lot of real-time games. You had like Star Ocean, and I did love Star Ocean, but it was few and far between. So that kind of comes to mind. Like, I don't really play a lot of turn-based anymore. But if I would say that I'm just literally sick of seeing, that's a strong way of putting it. But the closest I get to that is if I'm looking at a game and it looks interesting and then suddenly they're like, it's open world, my excitement level kind of takes a dip because I'm like, oh, what does that mean? What's the quality of the open world? How big is it? Is it doing that weird numbers game where they're going to be like, the map is 5.24 squared miles? And it's like, okay, that doesn't really mean anything.
17,000 ending to variance.
Yeah. And, you kind of get to that point where it's like the size of the world doesn't matter so much as how you utilize it. And you can have a massive world so long as that world is fun and engaging the entire time. But you can also have a fun and engaging world that's significantly smaller and feels larger by means of that. So when you look at something like that, open world games, I've been really liking, kind of like I talked about with 16, I've been liking that feeling of games that give you an open world vibe, but are really just allowing you to go back to hub areas that are linear in some ways, like God of War 2018, God of War Ragnarok, Final Fantasy 16. There's probably a handful of other ones, but I'm really liking that because I think it scratches the itch that the open world ideology gives you without becoming a mess. Chris is off the back of playing one of the best open world games of all time.
Correct.
Where are you feeling with open world? Because I guess the difference there is that Witcher 3 is a true RPG.
Correct.
So your distinction of open world action games with RPG elements, technically all open world action games with RPG elements, Witcher is that, but it's so much more.
I'm not coming to Far Cry for an RPG system and base building and leveling up my friends and waiting 30 minutes for my grass to grow. Like, that's not the shit I'm there for. And I think that's more than anything else. Forget open world games with RPG elements and narrow it down to shoehorned in RPG elements, right? Because an open world Far Cry is fine. But once it becomes, you can't go to this section of the island because you haven't leveled up your leg brace enough to take the damage. You know what I mean? Like, at that point, I'm like, I don't fucking care. This is fucking stupid. I don't need that.
That was a big disappointment for Far Cry 6 for me. And they had hints of that in New Dawn that I surprisingly didn't mind. But like whenever I went back and played Far Cry 3, I was like, yes. Far Cry 2 and 3 and even 4 are like the epitome of open worlds that are big but not stupid big, and you interact with them in fun ways. And you could arguably say that being able to upgrade your ammo pouches and stuff is RPG-like. I don't think that I consider that personally. You don't have to worry about putting gear on or worrying about level-locked area caps and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's funny. Maybe that's the best way to say it, is everything getting RPG elements shoehorned into it. It's kind of like people who miss the old school Assassin's Creed. A large part of that is because old school Assassin's Creed was still open world, but it wasn't level locking you out of areas. It wasn't telling you that you had to worry about what sword you had equipped and what hat you had equipped.
Yeah.
That's
just too much for me now.
You didn't have to have a health bar, an enemy health bar, which I don't mind an enemy health bar. It just depends on how it's being used in the game. You know,
I don't mind any of these elements. Just do it well. You know?
Yeah. In terms of a flip version of the question, what's a genre you would like to see more that you miss? Or a style of game at the very least? We're seeing a bit more of it this year, so it's an interesting time. But thinking back on the year, we had that question last week from Jehudi about game of the year, kind of where we are, and I kind of glossed over it because we got talking about. I guess maybe it was the episode before that, but we got to talking about how we've been playing some older stuff and whether or not the audience cares about that. And we pretty resoundingly heard that people like that we do play older stuff, which we kind of knew. But this is not a great example because it is an old game remade, but I don't think I stuck in just how great I think Dead Space Remake is. And I think Dead Space Remake does what I wish gaming would have ended up doing, which is using new technology to answer and solve problems that old technology couldn't, not just how much further you can push realism. Yes, Dead Space Remake is amazing because it looks so much better. And yeah, it's cool that the peel system exists, and the peel system has a utility. You actually see where you're putting your damage in. That gives you an increase. But what I actually love about it is no cut camera, no loading screens, no having to get in an elevator and the elevator stops and you're still in there for 30 seconds waiting for the level behind the walls to load. But I think the problem we got into is that PS4 really didn't do anything different than PS3. So you got the same type of games, but now the worlds could be so much bigger because the games could be bigger. And so that's where everybody dumped their resources in. How can we make it more hours and more time? Now that we've got the SSD, I would really like to see games come back to being like, hey, let's just make a really cool 15-hour game that people would be excited about playing again. And let's look at how this tech of the SSD and these level streaming and everything can be used to make a game without the problems that we had when we were making them in PS3. Because I think a lot of the game design language that we like came from PS3. We talk about that all the time. But you have all the downsides of the PS3, long loading times, bad texture pop in, all those different things. Like, some of the games that were supposed to be revolutionary during the PS3, like what's the game that got a Rage? Good example. Rage was supposed to be this breathtaking spectacle, even on console, and then you load it into PS3 and you walk outside and the sky won't pop in and the enemies won't pop in, and you're just like, what is happening? So yeah, I think that would be my answer to the flip side, and I think I want that to be the community's take. Is what is a genre that you miss? Chris, do you have a genre or a type of game that you kind of feel like you'd like to see make a big return?
Tactics games.
Oh, you're seeing the beginnings of that, I think, right? You're seeing like Diofield Chronicle and Triangle Strategy, and
I'll give it to Microsoft too. Gears Tactics.
Is
phenomenal.
It really good?
I love
I've heard
Gears Tactics.
Things. Yeah,
great game.
Yeah. All right.
So that's my answer.
Well, we have one more question, and then we have the I know what I did forget to get. I forgot to get the The Velvet's Corner. Can't do that. That's the sexiest part of the show. The last question that we have before we go into the community's take comes from Rude Days 93, one of our patrons. He says, curious what your thoughts are on the EU regulators forcing handhelds like the Switch and Steam Deck to have replaceable batteries in the future. In your opinion on if they would do the same with PlayStation controllers. As you may know, the EU regulators are pretty fierce. They are the reason that Apple is switching to USB-C across the board because the EU regulators consider having the Apple Lightning charger to be too specific for one phone, and it creates a lot of electronic waste. A lot of chargers go to waste and whatnot if people switch phones or whatever, and it stops people from being able to continually use one cord. And because of that, Apple took and said, well, we're not going to change how we manufacture it just for one region. So all regions are going to get this update. So you see something like this. Initial thoughts on the first half of that question, right? So Chris, what do you think about regulating handhelds to where they are required to allow you to change batteries?
I don't really like regulating anything, but I do think, especially for purchases like these, I mean, the Switch, I think to a lesser extent, but the Steam Deck and the Asus ROG and all those kind of handheld devices, I think making a replaceable battery in those kind of the standard, I'm not going to use the word regulated, but make them the standard is the best thing for consumers. Because if I'm dropping $1,500 on an Asus handheld device and the battery dies and I have to spend another $1,500, I'm going to shoot somebody in the head. Not literally, but I'm going to freak the fuck out, right? And that's, I think, why, to answer the second question, no, I don't think they should do the same thing with PlayStation controllers at $70. Not that that's no money, but that's not $1,500. It's not even $300. I think that's the difference for me.
So you think the push makes more sense to higher the investment?
Yes, exactly.
I agree to an extent because I think that's where a lot of trepidation for the Switch Lite came from, because the Switch had such bad Joy-Con issues. But the solution, at least, is that if you do have a problem, you can just go buy more controllers, like more Joy-Cons, and put them on and go about your day. And it's not that it's fun, but it's like it's a $70 solution versus a $200, $300 solution. And I think a lot of people looked at the Switch Lite and thought, well, if it has the same problems and no one knew at the time if it would, you have to just go get it repaired or buy another one. Those are kind of your options. And so a lot of people kind of approach that with, I don't know if I want to spend $200 when for $100 more, $50 more, whatever, I guess it was $100, I could get one that if that ever happens, I have a way to solve it without having to get rid of my console. So in looking at it like that, I've always thought it was weird that consoles went away from that. But I actually think I know what the reasoning is. Whether or not it was actually being done that way. Phones also don't do removable batteries anymore. Very few do. There's always room in the market for someone to say we're going to do it. But most people don't think about it. The reason is not only because of how thin people like their phones to be, how light they like them to be, but also waterproofing. Do you remember up until about 5 years ago, if you dropped your phone in water, it was kind of the end.
Yeah.
And now you really almost can't buy a phone that can't
put it in rice,
survive in like 8-foot water for 30 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what they're rated for. And you only get that from being able to make something that you can seal. But if you can seal it, nothing can come out. And so you're faced with a dilemma of, do you want your technology to be more susceptible to the elements, but more reasonable for people to fix if something goes wrong with, something that is simple like a battery? Or do you want something that is going to be sealed and last longer, but take more work to replace? Because the reality is that all batteries are replaceable. You can replace the battery in a Vita. You can replace the battery in 3DS. You can replace the battery in the Switch. You can replace the battery in all these things. It just takes more know-how, and most people are not going to want to try and overcome that barrier.
Yeah.
On Chris's thing about regulation, I'm kind of in the same mindset, but I think the problem we've run into is that what you hope is that the market sees the value of replaceable batteries and someone goes, we're going to make a product that has that as a feature, not as a takeaway. It's a feature, and people will buy it because they like that. But no one's really doing that. And so you run into that problem. Now, going into the scale, I do think scale matters because I really like rechargeable batteries in the controller. And when you do that, you know that you have a certain level of quality that you're charging and everything's going to work with. And if you start letting people put any battery that's rechargeable into a PlayStation 5, then you run into a problem. Because I've always wished that Xbox would just include rechargeable batteries in the controller and have it to where you can plug the controller in and it works with them. But if you want, you can also switch them out with AA's if you're in a pinch and want to go ahead and go without waiting. I've always thought that was a cool in-between, but they've never done that. So for $70, I don't particularly mind. And the batteries fail on those so seldom that I don't think I want to see them do that with controllers. I think that it comes into a point where how much is a device? Where is a reasonable line to say that the average consumer would be able to reasonably deal with this? And I think, some of the higher end Steam Decks are a good example of maybe these are a bit too costly to not have these options.
Yeah. It's just too much money to have. But
the flip side of that is you could probably take that to any repair shop locally and they could probably order the battery and put it in for, $100.
Definitely, probably true.
I don't know. Regulation is a weird thing because where do you draw the line? That's and what next are they going to dictate that's necessary, and what does that do to stifle creativity and competition? If everyone is being asked to go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
No, that's why I lean towards I wouldn't regulate any of this, and I think not having a replaceable battery in something as expensive as that should be a standard, but not a regulation.
Well, and I think part of the reason it's not is that if they were going out often enough that this was a real problem that people brought up to them, you'd see technology start going back to removable batteries, but you're not seeing it by and large. So it's not happening at enough of a rate to where it's something of concern.
Right.
So then it comes into the point of, while one person may get hit in a negative way with this, why does that need to dictate compelling what you do for the rest of the people that don't really have that problem?
Exactly.
And I'm going to tell you right now that the Vita is suddenly a lot less comfortable of a device if you suddenly have to design it for a way for you to remove a back plate to replace a battery easily.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't the PSP have that? And the
PSP did have that.
Yeah, so exactly. And
nice feature though.
Sure, but the PSPs explode.
Well, so did a sealed phone called the Galaxy Note. What was it? The Note 5? Was it the one that Note 6? I can't remember what it was. It was one of them that exploded.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So I mean, the part of me that's like, there's benefits to telling every phone that they need to use USB 3. If someone needs to borrow a charger from me, my charger will work for them moving forward because we have the same charger now. That's cool. But does that stop someone from going, hey, can I come up with a proprietary cord that's better for my product that I could put out with my product that would be useful just because of the fact that someone wants to regulate that all cords need to be the exact same? I see both sides. I see the benefits on both sides. I see the thing. So you run the risk. You got to look at what the reason for the regulation is and hope that it's at least a pure reason. You hope it is.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Oh, Chris, do you have any final thoughts on that?
No, I don't. I'm pretty good.
Good question. I do like that one.
Yeah.
One more question I forgot about before we go in there. What are your thoughts on Xbox and releasing? This is a good question. This is RMG0731 at Turning Amish on Twitter. What are your thoughts on Xbox and releasing unfinished games? Halo missing much of the multiplayer, Grounded as a beta for a year, Redfall, and now Forza Motorsport not having drifting or drag elements to a racing game at launch. Seems they intend to keep up this for sub-content. I do think this is a good question because Xbox has more often than not lately been releasing games with large swaths of things missing and going, don't worry, it's either early access or we're going to add it later. Does that matter to you?
Am fine if it's labeled early access and comes out at a discount in early access. Actually, you know what? It doesn't even have to be at a discount, but it should be called early access. I don't
So you know what you're getting into?
Exactly. Like, how can you just... But it's hard because I'm between two minds. Like, Halo wasn't really finished, but at the same
Halo
time,
wasn't.
It's just a mode that's not in it right now, at least in terms of Forza.
Split screen? Oh, yeah, Forza, yeah.
So with Forza, it's like, yeah, but if they told
Which
you
we
the
don't
mode
know,
wasn't...
but that's what they're saying.
Right.
The game could still be unfinished elsewhere. We just don't know.
Sure, absolutely. But they've announced this at the very least. And I don't know that I really jive with the idea that a game is not finished because it is missing a mode. That's the thing, right? Then that would mean that every game... So that would mean Spider-Man 2 came out unfinished. Fallout 3 came out unfinished. Actually, terrible example. But Spider-Man came out unfinished because it got DLC. So if a mode coming later... I get
what you mean, but I think the difference is if Spider-Man, which is a game about being a superhero, didn't have swinging...
Yeah.
And that's clearly too strong because that's like saying a racing game doesn't have a driving for some reason.
Right.
But a good example would be, and it's kind of hard because if you look at racing games, there's kind of an understanding of what racing games are, and you can look at the competition. So I think the question here you can look at is you can consider it unfinished in comparison to what the rest of the industry is doing. If you look at what Gran Turismo 7 is doing, and Gran Turismo 7 having these things day one, if you look at what the PC racing, more sim racing oriented games are doing, then that's where your comparison point comes in at. And so I think if you look at each one of these, you look at Halo and you go, well, what was Halo missing? All right, well, another game that came out unfinished that we can compare it to that also got a lot of shit was Battlefield 2049 or whatever the hell that game's called. 2042. So point being, those are games that launched missing fairly large parts of content and feature sets that you would expect. Then you have a game like Grounded, which I don't mind because Grounded was early access for a year, and they clearly
was free,
labeled
was it not?
It part of Game Pass. It wasn't free, but it was a Game Pass game. Then you have games like Sea of Thieves, which you could argue Sea of Thieves is a very different game now than it was at launch, but the game was a form of complete at launch. It's just the ability to continue to update has made the game more complete, which sounds wrong because that's not really what's happened, but they've been able to make the game even better and change a large swath of how the game works. I do think it's because of sub content. Clearly, if you're getting consistent money coming in for people wanting to play your game and they're doing that, it's going to drive, and it works well with the idea of what we were talking about earlier in the show of meta games changing and season passes and wanting to bring people in. And not only will the new season pass content want to bring them in, but oh cool, the game now does this, now you can do this instead, now you have this ability, you can swim underwater in the ocean where you couldn't before. Oh, okay, cool. I see both sides. I do think it's a bit rough that Forza is not just choosing to delay to make sure that two fairly important racing modes are in the game at launch. But
yeah, again, I think if the game comes out and works, it's not unfinished. But if the game comes out and is bad, I don't even know if I'm phrasing what I'm trying to say properly.
At that point, if a game comes out and is bad, it's still not unfinished,
right?
But unless somehow it's made suddenly absolutely better by those two game modes being put in, which I don't think is.
Here's the better way to put it, right? If the game that comes out does not meet your value of judgments, or it does not have enough value for you, right? If playing Forza and missing those two modes, you're like, yeah, this wasn't worth the money, then that doesn't mean it's unfinished. That just means it's lacking value, right? And they're adding value later. And that is the curse and benefit of Game Pass. Because if you're paying ostensibly nothing for Forza 5, for Forza 6 or whatever it is.
If you're paying $10 is what we'll call it, right?
If you're paying $10 for Forza and you get to really enjoy the racing in Forza for $10, and then in 2 months a new mode drops into Forza, and you have for $10 you have those new modes and the game you really enjoyed. What are you losing?
Yeah, I think it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, like
yeah, I mean, it's something that I hope to not see everyone repeat.
Yeah.
But I also think that's the type. I think it's the era of gaming we're in. Is a game can be complete but still be perfected more down the line. I think a good example of that is we saw Mass Effect 3 10 years ago do the same thing.
Yeah.
Come out complete, but then people complained, so they changed the ending and patched it into the game.
Yeah.
And you can, don't get me wrong, you can, it's the weird feeling of it is you can play a game and you can go, well, this is complete. Like the game, I can beat the game, but it feels like it's lacking. And then a good example of that, Final Fantasy 15, where they completely patched in a completely different version of one of the chapters because people just thought it was kind of weak. It's a weird choice, but it's kind of where we are with gaming. I guess the downside to it is that you always run the risk of playing a game and going, I may not be playing anywhere close to the best version of this game when I'm choosing to play it, which kind of makes you think, why don't I just wait until the game stops being supported to play it?
Yeah.
But the flip side is that a game can come out and kind of be rough and only get better. No Man's Sky is the perfect example of that.
Right. Well, and so is Halo for the opposite way, where, or I guess more towards my point, right? Is I agree with you, but I think Halo is the perfect example of what I was saying, where I think Halo, the game that came out, we loved, and for a couple of weeks on the show, like I definitely was. Halo's my game of the year. I don't know where you were at, but the problem was we lost steam because there was no new content coming out. The campaign wasn't even out. We couldn't extend our enjoyment with Forge, but what we had was still there, right? And that was still a game. Just wasn't worth it.
Yeah, no, it's a good example. All right. Well, thank you for the question. Right. I think it was an interesting one. And my real hope is that we don't see this copied too much in single player games. I think it makes more sense for multiplayer driven games. So hopefully we'll continue to see it there. But if nothing else, maybe we'll just see single player games still get better after releasing, which can only be a good thing, in all honesty.
Cyberpunk was a finished game, but
I mean, you could roll credits.
You could. Took 77 crashes for me.
All right, guys, we are going to move into the part of the show where we get sexy. You may know what that means. I didn't know
we have Velvet's Corner.
I didn't put it into the thing because I'm a fool, but we have it, and it's a spicy one. So if you want to, we know some people like to jump off here. So if so, we'll see you next week, and it's no big deal. Like we said, the community state question will be, what's a genre that you miss from gaming that you'd like to see make a return? That I look forward to hearing people's answers. If you have some games that are part of that genre that you're kind of showcases as to why you feel like that's needed in modern gaming, I'd love to hear them. But otherwise, we will see you guys next week. Remember, you follow us on social media at Triangle SQRD, Facebook, Triangle Square PlayStation Podcast Group. Description below. You can get the Discord, hop in, talk to us, chat with us about the podcast, anything we're talking about on here, give your thoughts, and so much more. But until next week, it is time to get sexy. Velvet's Corner. Chris, are you ready?
I'm ready.
This is spicy. This is a spicy Velvet's Corner. And I'm glad because it's the first time that you can't see it. You don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's true.
It's not sitting in a text document. If video game characters had social media accounts,
oh no,
who would be the first character to be canceled, and what would the post that got them in trouble be?
I'm not answering this one. Because the best answer was a joke we made before the show, and I refuse to say it on air. So I'm good. Sorry, Velvet.
Now I'm curious as to what we were talking about.
The Gex joke.
Oh, yeah. Overtly sexual characters would definitely top this list. And one of the more recent memory ones that I think would be really funny is Sully. I think Sully would be he would be the old man on Facebook commenting on young women's like bathing suit photos. And he would just say something that it was like, you know, that the general old school, like, well, it was fine in my time.
Yeah. Come sit on daddy's lap.
Yeah. I think Sully comes to mind. He's the right mix of older, kind of cool, but he also strikes me as the type of old guy who would never actually be on social media. But if he were, then he'd be the guy who was just like uncomfortably coming on to women.
Yeah.
See, here's the problem. I feel like Velvet tried catching us, whether purposefully or not. This feels like a catch-22. Because the moment we say the thing that the person would be getting canceled for, that came from our mind. And where does that blur the line between trying to cancel us?
That's why I refuse to make the Gex joke on air, because it's a great joke. But I'm not getting clipped. Like, I'm not having that. I'm good.
Oh, come on, man. Channel your inner Whitest Kids You Know. Have you ever seen the skit from Whitest Kids You Know where it's the commercial for grape soda or grape candy or whatever? Yes. It's like, I'm going to grape you in the mouth.
Yeah, it's a great joke. Look, I made the joke about gexual assault, and I feel like that would very, very quickly get him canceled.
Gex is just posting on every picture he can, and he's like, slip of the tongue, baby. Mm-hmm. And he's going to get canceled because it's going to end up being one of those 16-year-old girls that he doesn't know, but they look like they're 25. That's what's going to be.
Imagine your YouTube notifications, right? It pops up and it goes on a special episode of Hansen versus Predator. Gex the Gecko.
And he walks in. I would love for him to be the same scale size as the gecko from Geico. Yeah. So he's like a small 1 foot lizard walking in with some
Chris
sunglasses.
Hansen just like his chin on the counter, and he's like, I have the chat logs right here. You were coming here to watch football? What is I'm like going to shove my tail in your blank meat? I don't. These are direct quotes from Chris Hansen himself. Yeah, so I think
I like that one.
We're going Gex.
Gex is a really good answer.
Wait,
he's like the perfect overtly. Is it Conquer?
No.
Because Conquer came to mind.
No, it's truly the best answer. Because there's
my God. It's Duke Nukem.
Yes!
How did I not know this immediately?
Because here's the thing. Duke Nukem would get canceled for a multitude of things, right?
Oh, yeah.
He would get canceled because he's a misogynist. He would get canceled because he would very clearly be a host on a Daily Wire show. Like, he would 100% be a verified Twitter user. Like,
body positivity issues would come into play. Like, he's setting an unrealistic expectation for bodies. He would probably be. He'd probably be body shaming.
Trigger discipline. But here's the thing. Here's what Duke Nukem would get canceled for. He would get canceled because he freaked out on someone in the gym because he was recording his workouts. That's why Duke Nukem gets canceled. Everything else is fine, but that's what gets him canceled.
I like that one.
You pop up and it's like half the video of Duke Nukem freaking out, and then it's that Joey Swole guy, and he's like, all right, this is not how we treat people in the gym. You know, that's all we'd see. It's perfect. When somebody says stop recording, you stop recording. That's gym etiquette. That's what Duke Nukem gets canceled for. It's Gex and Duke Nukem.
On the flip side,
and Cassie Drake.
Just because I think this is super. Just because I think this would be funny. Who do you think would be a video game character who got into crap because she was working out and recording herself working out, and then another video game character just happened to look her way and she was like, he was watching me while I was recording?
Oh, that's easy. Nadine Drake.
You think Nadine would go off like that?
Well, I don't see Chloe doing it.
I don't see Chloe doing it. You might be right.
It's Ellie. Ellie, that's her name? No. Elena. Sorry. That was
Elena,
bad.
yeah.
It's Elena, and then it's the camera guy from Uncharted 1 2. And they had just worked out their differences before they went to like Africa or whatever, and then he passes away.
And then she has to live with the regret of yelling at him for watching her when she told him to record her working out. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be it.
Oh. Or would it be
that is one of the funniest interactions to see online is girls calling a dude a perv. And then I watched a video of a dude and like all they did was like look over and kind of go, and then you could see that it looks like they're trying to figure out if they're recording or what.
Yeah.
And then they look away and they're like, can you believe this creep? And I'm like, you're in a gym with a camera pointed at you to show other people you working out, and someone else watched you work out. Is he a creep if he did it behind his phone screen when you post that later? Like that's where's the disconnect?
The guys jerking it to that are not creeps. But this guy who's just doing his sets, he's a creep. I love the one where it's the girl who has a freak out and she's like, oh, yeah, keep on stepping or whatever it is. And then the guy ends up being like the owner of the gym and fucking bans her and revokes her membership. Something along those lines. Great stuff.
Man, I'm trying to think of if there's any more, but Duke Nukem is like such the perfect answer. But Gex is not far off. I'm just going to Gex is pretty damn close.
I feel like
Leisure Suit Larry may be somewhere in the talk here.
Leisure Suit Larry is a big one. I mean, a GTA character, like kind of like Nico.
Yeah.
I mean, think about everything Nico does in his past.
Any GTA character, realist. Oh, yeah, I have the other
Nico's
answer.
the one who would care.
It'd be Micah from Red Dead 2.
Trevor
would probably be a pretty good one. He would get canceled.
But Trevor would be like, he would be like a Sneeko or a Nick Fuentes who just gives no shits that he got canceled. And he's
I was about to say what he actually think he would be like a Squeezy Jibs.
Who?
You don't know who Squeezy Jibs is? Hold on. Squeezy for real, Squeezy Jibs. Go find the man. You've seen this man before. He was a big meme guy for a while. SKWEEZY JIBBS. Squeezy Jibs. He's like Malibu's Most Wanted.
Okay. King Kong.
He's just really stupid.
I know this guy. Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
that
funny.
strikes me as Trevor energy.
Yeah, that's
like he's a little more chill, but you know.
It's Trevor without the murder.
Yes, exactly. It's like if Trevor was on some downers.
Yeah, absolutely. There's gotta be like in my head, I feel like there's better characters.
I don't know. Duke Nukem was like such
I have a cheat. There's like a cheat code, right? Because we could choose. We could choose like Domingo Herman or Aroldis Chapman, both of which assaulted their wives in real life and play Major League Baseball, thus being in MLB 23 The Show, being legitimately canceled.
Here's the other thing, though, because the problem with that is that if you go into people who exist in actual history and who are real people and game characters, that gets so easy because the answer just becomes Hitler from the fucking Sniper Elite games. And Hitler is clearly canceled for one very specific reason.
I think there's like about 6 million specific reasons that he was canceled.
Yeah. So point being, yeah.
Okay.
So that's too easy. That's a cheat code to the extreme.
Okay, I think I might have it, but honestly, the character might be too hot to be canceled for this.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Ezio Auditore.
Okay, Italian dude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a joke. I can't remember the comedian's name. Kind of a bigger guy, bald head, longer hair, but thin on top. I know his name, and it's just escaping me. He's like a
middle-aged white guy. I don't know.
100%.
Joe Rogan.
Hold on, he's got an odd name. Hold on, is he Greek? I really don't know.
Russell Brand.
No.
Tom Segura. Burt Kreischer.
No, it's going to kill me. I really don't know the guy's name right now.
John Mulaney. John Mulaney is playing Plastic Man. If you had,
of course, I see this man all the time. It's going to be so funny that I can't. Like, maybe I could even open up Facebook and just find it. Stavros. Hold on. I think I just may have remembered it. Stavros Halkias. And I don't know what he is. I don't know.
All right.
He had a joke where he's talking about. He's talking about the borders, and he's like, I think we have a problem where we're worried about the wrong refugees coming in. And he's like, have you ever seen an Italian guy?
Facts.
He's like an Italian guy's asking every girl what their age is, just in case.
Yeah.
It's like, have you ever ordered a pizza in this country? And he's like, and yeah, we can't have the guy from from the Middle East coming over. He's like, how is customs letting this guy through?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
There's got to be better characters too. That's the hard thing. Is like I feel like Duke Nukem and Gex were really good answers, but I feel like they were easy answers.
See, but what's a deep cut, right?
And like you would have to agree that Ezio, if he's ugly, gets canceled. But the Ezio in the games, given his looks, is just making YouTube videos where he just picks up chicks.
I mean, yeah, maybe. Part of me thinks that I have in my head. This is a completely different question, and it's ridiculous. But in my head, I think what video game? And I think it's because of the fact that Ezio kind of perfectly embodies this. I don't even know why I feel this way, but like, what video game characters would be the cast of Jersey Shore? Basically, like what 5, 6, however many however many people are in Jersey Shore, what 5 or 6 characters from games could you put into a show and have it essentially be
Velvet? Brett has given you next week's Velvet Quarter. He's handed it to you on a silver platter.
I won't answer it. I'll save those answers, but it came to my mind immediately.
Think about that because it's a great one. And also Kratos. Specifically Sparta Kratos.
He
canceled immediately. No, I don't know that canceled would be the right term for arrested for first-degree murder. So I don't know.
Yes, that's the problem with cancel is it's got to be it can't be actions. So in that sense, so much as it's got to be like thoughts and the way that you.
Are there any
Skyrim
yourself. Characters? Like that world seems rife for this kind of thing.
Well, there's plenty. Name any of the Nords in that game who are racist against the Dunmer. Windhelm,
that's a good point.
The Grey Quarter. I mean, you have literally an entire section where they have segregated the Dunmer.
The problem with that specifically is that if the Nords had social media, they would probably be okay, because you would think that everyone who has access to it is probably on their side, except obviously that he gets canceled by the Dwemer, right? They get canceled by them. That's fine. But, I don't know. That's like a Louis C.K. level of canceled. You know what I mean?
What video game characters would have an OnlyFans? Quiet?
No, not Quiet. Bayonetta? No.
You think?
Yeah, maybe. I can see her having one, but it's a lewd OnlyFans. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I don't get naked, but I pose with my butt up. That kind of thing.
Maybe. I could see Ashley Graham from Resident Evil 4, like keeps herself covered up, but then she gets alone in the bedroom.
Speaking of Resident Evil 4, Leon.
Is Leon going to get canceled?
Oh, no, I was talking about the OnlyFans.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. 100%, dude.
Yeah.
Now, he'd be the Matt Rife of that world. He'd be like the comedian that everybody wants to... that everybody wants to just bone. You know what I mean?
Winters. He has the OnlyFans. After I died and became goo, you don't want to know what happens. Pay $15 to see all my goo.
Oh, God. Oh, that is terrible.
Him and Lady Demetrescu or whatever.
Demetrescu or whatever. Yeah, I actually don't know how you say her name. That's just my guess. Yeah, Chris, I think we've solved this answer. That's what you have right now. I think that there's something to be said about Roman, though. I do think Roman coming into the conversation somewhere would
from GTA 4?
Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah. Hello, cousin. Want to go to strip club? Okay, cousin. Another time.
That is so stupid.
Roman's a good answer. I like Roman. What about Johnny Gat? Or is he just a criminal already, so it doesn't really matter?
I feel like, I don't know. I feel like you can only cancel people who'd care.
And like on social media, they literally are killing people for likes. So like, I don't know that they would get canceled for that. They have social media in their world. Ooh, I have an answer.
Mario.
Okay, Mario,
because they would consider him.
They catch him on video walking down New York streets, sees a hot chick, and just goes, "Mamma mia!" And then he's over. It's done.
And they do the Gillette commercial where some guy like puts his hand up him. He's like, "No."
The better answer is
I was going to say they were going to do it for him being misogynistic for always treating Peach as though she's a damsel in distress.
Well, that's Bowser. Here's the thing. Here's the real like Mario thing, right? They get Mario on video doing something misogynistic and sexist and gross, and Luigi is the one who gets canceled for it.
He takes the fall.
He does. It's like, it's not me. I'm sorry if I offended anyone from.
I'm sorry if I offended any. Honestly, the fact that Mario has become a cultural icon while single-handedly being a stereotype of Italian people is amazing.
I mean, specifically Italian plumbers. They can't be happy.
I'm just saying, that kind of checks out. You look at it and you think to yourself, how is that okay? Everyone loves Mario, and he is a stereotype, and we're all told that we're supposed to fight stereotypes. Which one is it?
I have nothing to say.
That will conclude this week's
Velvet's Corner.
All right, guys.
The guy from Spec Ops: The Line. Easy.
All right, guys. Subtle reminder there after
Cancel
all of that ridiculousness. If you want to support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/nardtech and give us a little $1 per month, like so many of our listeners do. We are very appreciative of those who do so. If you like what we're doing and you want to help keep the show going along, this show will probably always continue so long as we always have people to listen, and Patreon at least covers what it costs us to do this. We are very thankful that we have that ability when there are plenty of people out there who don't. So thanks to each and every one of you. We'll see you next week. Chris, thank you for joining me as always. And I think with that, we will end the show without further ado. A shout out to our patrons who we thank at the end of every episode, while we still have a list that's reasonable enough to do that. So thank you to Spencer, Brandon Edwards, Alex, Barry Rogers, Red Eye, Aztec King, Lecheon69, The Lord Corgi, Hammond Egger, Bailey Robertson, Mark Schutz, Cypher Primus, Kyle Grimm, Rude Days 93, Kevin Bacon Bits, Danny Villalobos, Jehudi MD, No Fate, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Donovan Williams, Matthew Green, and Sean Santarud. Thanks to each and every one of you. See you next week.